In Marvel, you refer to this as magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1. Mages also need to go to school. Camotage. As a learning base for trainee mages, there are many trainee mages here every day, following several disciples of the Supreme Mage, Ancient One, to practice. In Camotage, there are a total of 3 disciples of the Supreme Mage who are responsible for teaching them spells. As the librarian of Camotage, Wong has the most theoretical knowledge. Mordo is very experienced in combat, and he is also mainly responsible for the training of trainee mages. As for Cassilis, he is also the one who combines theory and practice best, and is also considered by many trainee mages to be the strongest mage under Ancient One. In addition to the 3 of them, Ancient One has another disciple, a child who is only 16 years old, Ronan. It is rumored that he is an orphan that Ancient One met when he went down the mountain 16 years ago. In order to keep the child alive, Ancient One brought him to live in Camotage. In fact, he is one of the few people who really grew up in Camotage. But whenever he is mentioned, most people will show a very strange expression on their faces. Because he is different from most mages, at this moment, his most important job is not to practice magic, but to attend classes in a middle school in New York. At this point in time, he seems to be studying hard. The person they are talking about is undoubtedly Ronan. At this moment, Ronan is sitting in a classroom of Midtown Middle School, looking at the teacher on the podium boredly. Who would have thought that the disciple of the Supreme Mage Ancient One would actually be in a high school? He even has the golden finger that is essential for time travelers. A golden finger that even Ancient One is surprised to see. 10 years ago, when Ronan was 6 years old, he first came into contact with the magic of Camotage. It was also at that time that Ronan brought her a completely different shock. The Door of Mysticism is an entry-level spell of Camotage. When Ronan began to learn this spell, a very strange thing happened. The suspension ring, as a necessary item for releasing the Door of Mysticism. Without it, even the strong Ancient One cannot use this trick. But Ronan opened the secret door according to the hand gesture taught by the Ancient One without using the hanging ring. Even when Ronan tried for the second time, he didn't even make the hand gesture. With just a thought, he opened the secret door. You know, this is his first time to contact and cast a spell. However, Ronan understood that he just added a point. That's right, his system is very simple and rough, just adding points. Deep blue, add points. Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but glance at his system interface. Name, Ronan. Occupation, student, mage. Level 4. Experience 15,327/16,000. Remaining points 0. Skills, Camotage, meditation +2, can quickly calm the mood and restore mana. +2 characteristics, faster recovery of mana, slightly enhanced mental strength. Secret door +1, can be teleported to any place you have been through the secret door. +1 features, no need to use hanging rings or hand gestures. You can open the secret door to travel through at will. Ring of Ragada, both hands are in the shape of a shield, which can resist damage or attack. Energy whip, condensed into an energy whip through magic, attack the enemy. Astral projection +1, the soul leaves the body and can study, practice, etc., or directly attack the soul body. +1 features, the soul power is enhanced. If the soul body's power is lower than yours, it can be killed instantly. That's right, you can't imagine that a person with such power is actually hanging around in high school. Every day, he is accompanied by study and homework. Unfortunately, this is an order issued by his teacher, the Ancient One. It must be completed. Of course, the word hanging around is not so correct. After all, Ronan's grades are also ranked in the top 3 in the whole class. As for the top 2, Ronan glanced at a man and a woman not far away. Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy. The former, as a typical nerd, has always been the target of bullying by those school bullies in the school. In recent years, Ronan has finally seen the legendary American bullying. The latter, no one in the whole school dared to provoke this princess. If the little hooligans in the football team didn't want to be accidentally implicated in some cases, they could only stay away from this little princess. As for Ronan, his current status was earned by using Kamatage's self-defense skills. Ding ling ling. The get out of class was over. This beautiful bell sounded as if it was the salvation given to Ronan by God. Okay, let's stop here for this class. I will send the homework to the emails of all the students. Class is over. After saying this, the teacher on the podium turned around and left the classroom without any nostalgia. This is also what Ronan likes most about them. Woohoo. When the teacher walked out of the classroom, the unified phenomenon of schools in the world appeared. The classroom, which was originally so quiet that you could hear a pin drop, suddenly became lively. As a famous nerd, Peter Parker was the first to walk out of the classroom, faster than anyone else. If he was slower, he would be blocked at the door by several school bullies, and you can imagine what would happen next. However, Ronan didn't care so much. He just packed up his things and walked quickly to the door. As he expected, several white students appeared at the door of the classroom. They were laughing recklessly, as if waiting for someone at the door of the classroom. However, the moment Ronan walked out of the classroom, the laughter suddenly disappeared. The expressions on the faces of several white students also froze. They looked at each other and saw a word in each other's eyes. Pain. Ronan, we are not here to find you today. The leading student swallowed his saliva and seemed very nervous. However, Ronan just glanced at them and passed by several people. When they passed by, the breathing of several people seemed to be stagnant and became smooth again. The person who just talked to Ronan felt relieved. It was not because of anything else. It was just because Ronan's punch was too heavy. However, in Ronan's heart, the weight of several people was not even as important as this beautiful weekend. It was hard to get a holiday to rest, and it would be a big loss to spend time on these few people. So Ronan walked out of the school gate quickly. He wanted to find a deserted place to open a portal and go directly back to Kamatage. However, just when Ronan stepped out of the school gate, a deafening roar suddenly sounded. Then, there were screams from many people. In the distant sky, an extremely huge black hole appeared. Aliens flew out of the black hole one after another. Ronan couldn't help but open his mouth. Is today the Avengers 1? Hello everyone, this is the author, who traveled through the timeline for a month. Please be sure to read to the last chapter, because it is too important for a book. If you like it, please try to keep the book as little as possible, because the recommendation of Gideon is based on how many people follow it. So, if you like it, please be sure to read to the latest chapter. Please. Chapter 2, Unexpected Visitors. Fuck. Ronan uttered an American curse. Although he had seen this plot in his previous life, he was not sure about the exact date. He only remembered that the last time he heard about the Avengers was when Tony Stark was attacked on the racetrack. That was more than a year ago. However, he was busy with his junior high school to senior high school, so he could not watch Tony Stark being beaten. What a weekend surprise. Ronan sighed. The police around the school called on the people to hurry to a safe place. The people around were running away from the black hole like crazy, and the sirens seemed to remind them, it's time to take shelter. Should I say this is a daily life of the people in the Marvel world? Ronan silently complained, quickly bypassed the running crowd, and turned into a quiet and deserted alley. He gently raised his foot, and a golden portal appeared out of thin air. At the other end of the portal was the New York Temple. As Ronan stepped into the portal, the golden sparks quickly disappeared. At this moment, a face that Ronan was very familiar with appeared behind a trash can not far away. Peter Parker. What the F *CK? New York Temple. Ronan took a step and instantly arrived at the rooftop of the New York Temple. At this time, Ancient One was standing on the rooftop, playing the game of destroying the cheetahs. He casually threw a Gragado ring, and a cheetah flying soldier fell. It seems to feel good, teacher. Ronan threw down his school bag and joined this small game. Because in his eyes, these cute cheetah cavalrymen are all experience. I have to admit that small games like this are really the favorite of mages. After all, the New York Temple is under the protection of the magic circle, and these cheetahs can't see their existence at all. Therefore, Ronan and his team basically attack them without injury. Just be careful of the falling fragments. Teacher, don't you want to help them? Ronan threw the magic ring in his hand and glanced at his system. Experience plus 50. Experience plus 50. Blood profit. Ronan's face lit up. It seemed that he had no choice but to reach level 5 today. According to the system, whenever he reached level 5 or a multiple of 5, the system would randomly grant him a skill from another world. Ronan had been looking forward to this skill for a long time. No need. Whether we participate in the battle or not has no impact on the overall situation. They can solve this disaster. Ancient One shook his head. As the guardian of the earth, Kamatage's mission was to protect the earth from invasion by external forces. But this time, Ancient One chose to stand aside and watch. Is it the so-called fate? Ronan smiled. In a way, he was the same as Ancient One now. They all knew clearly what would happen in the future and what the endings of those superheroes would be. However, Ancient One shook his head and stopped what he was doing. Someone is coming. As he spoke, Ancient One looked at the other side of the rooftop. A green figure over 2 meters tall jumped down from the sky and landed on the rooftop. Ronan could clearly feel the rooftop shaking. The Hulk. No, to be more precise, it is the new version of the Hulk that is a fusion of Hulk and Bruce Banner. Ronan opened his mouth, and he seemed to have guessed something. Bruce Banner looked at the door leading downstairs and stretched out his hand to open it. You have to be careful when you go over there. After all, the floor has just been waxed. At this time, Ancient One interrupted Bruce Banner's action. Bruce Banner heard the voice and looked over here and saw Ancient One and Ronan at the same time. He glanced at Ronan, and his face seemed a little confused. I'm here to find Doctor Strange. When Bruce Banner said this, Ronan couldn't help but roll his eyes. Damn parallel time and space theory. No, it's not right. To be more precise, this should be the present and the future. At least at this moment, it can still be called the present and the future. Because not long after, because the future Tony Stark lost the space gem, that is, the cosmic cube, Loki used it to escape. Invisibly established another parallel universe. The fixed future of this world should be that Loki took the space gem when Asgard was destroyed. Until Avengers 4, he took out the gem and tried to sneak attack Thanos, but was crushed to death by Thanos. The parallel universe created was Loki, who was captured by the space-time administration. In other words, the moment Loki took the cosmic cube, Ronan was about to enter a brand new parallel universe. You came about 5 years too early. And now Doctor Strange is doing surgery 20 blocks away. The Ancient One glanced to the left and pointed to that location. Then, he looked at Bruce Banner again. What do you want to do with him? There was no surprise on the face of the Ancient One. Ronan on the side couldn't help but want to laugh. In fact, the Ancient One knew everything, but he didn't say anything. It's for that. Bruce Banner pointed to the Eye of Agamotto worn by the Ancient One. The Ancient One shook his head and smiled. That's probably not possible. After all, this is a time stone. Even if the Ancient One knows their intentions, there are still some things to say. At least that's the case from the timeline. Sorry, I don't plan to discuss it either. As he said that, Bruce Banner moved his neck and took 2 steps forward. But when he took the second step, the sudden weightlessness made him fall directly. The next second, a portal appeared in the sky again. Bruce Banner's figure fell from the sky and fell into the portal on the ground. Repeatedly, Guyi looked at Bruce Banner, who kept exclaiming, disappearing, appearing, and falling in front of him, and a smile appeared on his face. She turned her head and looked at Ronan, who looked harmless. It seems that you are very proficient in using the secret door. Especially when she saw Ronan's empty fingers, the smile on her face became even more. Ronan is the first in the entire Kamatage to use the secret door without wearing a hanging ring or using gestures. I just think he is a little arrogant. After all, in our territory, being so arrogant is not a good thing. Ronan shrugged. He was consciously changing the direction of the future. Since Bruce Banner and his arrival will make this world a brand new parallel universe, then he wanted to try it. If he changed more, would there be a different situation? He was looking forward to it. Okay, I know his intention and purpose. Let him out. Ancient One smiled and shook her head. She seemed to see something. Ronan curled his lips. Bruce Banner, who was falling continuously, landed on the roof with a bang. The roof shook again. Ah, damn it. Bruce Banner covered his head with his hands, his stomach churning. Even though he was the Hulk, it was the first time he encountered such a situation. Who is this kid? Bruce Banner looked at Ronan with great fear. After all, it was this young man who gave him a new version of the ship that he had never experienced before. Ancient One walked forward slowly, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth again. He is the next Supreme Sorcerer. Chapter 3, NTR in person. Ancient One's words made Bruce Banner and Ronan full of question marks. The next Supreme Sorcerer. Isn't that Stephen Strange? Why do I remember that the next Supreme Sorcerer is Doctor Strange? Bruce Banner muttered to himself, but he quickly shook his head and took another step forward. That has nothing to do with me. My only goal is that stone. As he said that, he made a snatching motion. You will regret it. Just as Ancient One's voice fell, Bruce Banner's right hand was close to Ancient One. However, bang, Ancient One hit Bruce Banner's abdomen with a palm, and Bruce Banner's human body was directly beaten out. Woohoo. Ronan on the side whistled, looking like he was watching the excitement. Watching movies is at most 3D and 4D, which is not as comfortable as watching live broadcasts. He took a step forward, and his figure instantly came behind the big Bruce Banner, resisting his body that was about to fall. Uncle, you should lose some weight. Ronan couldn't help complaining when he looked at the soul of Bruce Banner beside him. After saying that, he gently bumped, and the large Bruce Banner gently fell on the recliner beside him. Along with it, there was also a hat that covered his face. Bruce Banner, on the other hand, was in a state of confusion. Ronan, I think you can go and help them, but don't reveal your origins. Guyi looked at Ronan, who was like a spectator, and said with a smile. Hearing this, Ronan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Could it be that I, the future Supreme Sorcerer, can't listen to these words? However, he didn't say much. He had already heard what he should hear, so he might as well go to the front line to mix some experience. Thinking of this, a portal appeared behind Ronan. Bye. Ronan waved to Bruce Banner's soul body, and with a slight jump back, the man disappeared on the rooftop. Watching Ronan leave, Guyi turned his eyes to Bruce Banner. Let's start from the beginning, shall we? On the other side, the battlefield has entered a white-hot state. As another Bruce Banner rode a small motorcycle to the battlefield and completed the transformation, the giant creature from Cheetah was also beaten to pieces by his punch. The familiar BGM seemed to sound faintly. The surrounding Cheetah people looked over here and roared at several people. The first generation of Avengers also gathered together and posed. Especially Hulk, he roared at these Cheetah people twice. The 6 people formed a circle, all with resolute expressions on their faces. The war seemed to be imminent. Zzzz in such a tense atmosphere, a trace of golden sparks flashed in the air. Soon, something like a circle appeared in front of them. A human about 1.8 meters tall stepped out of the circle. On his head, he was wearing a helmet similar to Iron Man. There is no doubt that this person is Ronan. Sorry, did I disturb you guys posing? Ronan looked at the people in front of him who were waiting in full battle array and seemed to understand something. The first generation of Avengers is gathering. When the background music sounded, how many people would shout, "My youth is back"? Who are you? The one who asked this question was naturally Tony Stark. After all, in order to hide his identity, Ronan was wearing an Iron Man helmet on his head. This is a naked infringement. Good question. Maybe I'm just a genin who wants to be Hawkeye? Or a man who wants to be the Pirate King? Ronan shrugged, and anyone could hear that this answer was not even perfunctory. Seeing that several people were focusing on him, as if they were going to pacify the country before fighting against foreign enemies if they disagreed, Ronan cleared his throat. Ahem. I just want to help, nothing else. Ronan's explanation made the Hammer God roll his eyes. Brother, what were you doing earlier? His words were also what the others wanted to ask. After all, based on the weird scene just now, I always feel that this person should be quite strong. Are you in class? Ronan asked a rhetorical question. But soon, Steve Rogers interrupted the conversation of several people. Should we deal with these aliens first? As he said that, he also looked at these Chiritus. Even he knew that it was wrong to stabilize the country before fighting against foreign enemies. After all, the advantage was not in their hands. Several people did not speak, and they all looked around. Ronan stretched his muscles and stretched his waist. "Jarvis, turn on the system." As Ronan said this, the Iron Man helmet on his head made a sound, and the position of his eyes also bloomed with light. "Hello, I'm Jarvis." Jarvis's electronic synthesized voice also sounded. It was almost the same as a real Jarvis. "Walter?" Tony Stark tilted his head and opened his mouth, seeming a little incredible. "Jarvis, attack state. Zzzzz." As Ronan changed the password, the 5-cent sound effect sounded again, and the position of the eyes of the helmet also turned red for combat status. "Woohoo, let's start." Ronan screamed and rushed out. Steve Rogers looked at Ronan's back and turned to look at Tony Stark. "Don't look at me, I don't have such a crappy sound effect, Anne." However, before he could finish his words, a roar attracted the attention of the two again. A red energy whip appeared in Ronan's hands. He threw the energy whip in his right hand, and a cheetah soldier who was running was tied up instantly. The next second, a magic circle appeared in Ronan's left hand, which bounced a laser bullet out. Boom. The energy whip smashed the cheetah soldier onto a building nearby, and the bounced laser bullet also shot into the brain of another cheetah man. His action attracted the cheetah people around him. Ronan was about to be surrounded. However, Ronan did not panic at all. He flicked the energy whip in his right hand lightly, and it disappeared, replaced by a ring of ragged ore. "Next, please enjoy the Death Lotus from Ms. Carter." After saying that, Ronan's body began to spin rapidly. As he spun, he threw out the magic rings in his hands one by one. Boom. Boom. Continuous explosions sounded, and with Ronan as the center, all the Chirita people around him were ruthlessly attacked by the magic rings. Experience plus 50, experience plus 50, experience plus 50. Looking at the rapidly increasing experience, Ronan's eyes became brighter and brighter. Finally, the system sounded a very beautiful prompt. The experience value is full, and the host is automatically upgraded to level 5. Skill point plus 1. Skill observation haki has been issued. Woohoo. When Ronan heard the system prompt, his excitement was beyond words. He even wanted to roar to the sky. However, he quickly suppressed his excitement. But the magic rings in his hand were thrown out faster than before. This is one experience after another. As the explosions continued, screams continued. But this time, it was not the screams of humans, but the screams of Chirita. Steve Rogers, who was standing still, quickly extended his shield to block a magic ring that accidentally flew towards him, and looked at Tony Stark next to him again. His eyes were self-evident. "What did you want to say just now?" Tony Stark pulled the corner of his mouth, looked at the energy cannon in his palm, and tilted his head a little embarrassedly. "Jarvis, combat status. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 4 to Iron Men. New York Temple, Rooftop. "Sorry, I can't help you with this. If I give you the time stone to save your reality, then our reality will be in danger." On the rooftop of the New York Temple, Ancient One rejected Bruce Banner's request. Although she already knew everything, she still had to follow the script. In a way, Ancient One is not only the most powerful wizard, but also a top actor. At least the expression on her face made Bruce Banner believe it. "No, scientific theory is not like that," Bruce Banner said hurriedly. After all, he couldn't beat Ancient One, so he could only rely on his mouth. However, Ancient One glanced at him, gently pushed back with his right hand, and a shining line appeared on the rooftop. The Infinity Stones created the time flow you see. Missing a gem means diversion. As he said, Ancient One's right hand flicked off a gem, and a black line appeared on the line. "This may help your reality, but my situation is completely different. In this new branch of reality, the main force against darkness has been lost. Our world will be in danger. So tell me, Bruce, can your scientific theory prevent all this from happening?" Ancient One looked at Bruce Banner in front of him, and his tone seemed very stern. She was right. The loss of a gem means the emergence of a new time stream, that is, a brand new parallel universe. The entire universe will also have a new turning point. Bruce Banner pondered slightly, but soon gave an answer. No, I can't stop it, but I can eliminate it all. As long as we use up the gems and return them to their original owners at the origin of time. From the perspective of time and space, these gems have never left. As he said, Bruce Banner also imitated Ancient One, grabbed the gems that were just flicked away by Ancient One, and put them back into the formed time stream. Visible to the naked eye, the black time stream that had just been separated slowly disappeared. Seeing the changes in front of him, Ancient One seemed a little surprised. However, she slowly turned around and walked to the edge of the rooftop. But you seem to have forgotten the most important thing. If you want to return these gems to us, you must survive. The Ancient One looked at Bruce Banner and asked the most important question. Once they die, these gems will not return to this world, and everything will end. We will, I can promise. Bruce Banner said quickly. However, the Ancient One shook his head. I can't take this risk, just because of your promise. The duty of the Supreme Sorcerer is to protect the Time Stone. The Ancient One's words made Bruce Banner a little impatient. Then why did Strange hand it over? He too at this point. Bruce Banner seemed to think of something. He is at least the Supreme Sorcerer of our world. Because he clearly remembered that not long ago, the young man next to the Ancient One was called the next Supreme Sorcerer by the Ancient One. This means that this world seems to be completely different from their world. What did you say? Strange handed the gems over? Your world, timeline at this point. The Ancient One seemed to suddenly realize something, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. No one knew that the surprise she showed at this moment came entirely from her true emotions. She seemed to understand everything all of a sudden. That's right, the Supreme Sorcerer of our world is not the child just now, but Doctor Strange who performed the operation 20 blocks away. He handed over the gem. Bruce Banner scratched his head, and things seemed to be completely out of his control. Here, not only could he not get the time stone, but even the Supreme Sorcerer had changed. He suddenly had an ominous premonition about this matter. So that's it. If it's normal, Ancient One muttered to herself. She gently stroked the eye of Agamotto, but a smile appeared on her face. She took a deep breath and slowly walked towards Bruce Banner. I have a brand new proposal. Do you want to listen to it? On the other side, the battlefield finally came to an end. After being repeatedly beaten by Hulk, Loki finally reached the peak of his life. At the same time, he was stared at by 6 members of the Avengers. Oh no, it should be 7. And outside their window, there was also an Iron Man looking at them. Captain, hurry up, they are already finishing up. As he said that, the Iron Man entered the Stark building and quietly approached a few people. At this time, the first generation of Avengers were cordially communicating with Loki. Looking at these familiar faces from his youth, Tony Stark couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Mr. Rogers, I almost forgot about your clothes. The effect of lifting the buttocks is simply unbearable to watch. Tony Stark said quietly in the headset, while watching Captain America walking. On the other side of the headset, there was Steve Rogers who also came from the future. The two laughed and joked, and Ant-Man Scott Lang standing on Tony Stark's shoulder seemed to have discovered a blind spot. Wait, Mr. Stark, who is the person wearing your mask? Why are there 2 Iron Men here? Is that your brother? Scott Lang found Ronan. At this time, Ronan was still wearing the Iron Man mask, and was still wearing casual clothes. I don't have a brother. I don't know either. Wait, why is he walking this way? Tony Stark was shocked. However, before he could change his position, the masked young man actually came in front of them. Subconsciously, Tony Stark was about to transform. No. Ronan stretched out his index finger and shook it. Wow, another surprise for the weekend? Ronan looked at them with a smile, as if he knew nothing. Tony Stark and Scott Lang were stunned. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. Tony, how are you guys doing? I'm ready. Steve Rogers' voice came from the headset. Tony Stark touched the headset lightly and replied with a little embarrassment. There seems to be a little problem here. However, he didn't know how to explain the current situation. Don't be nervous, Mr. Stark. Oh, should I say, Mr. Stark from the future? Ronan's voice sounded, but in this voice, there seemed to be a little bit of cunning. He took out the mobile phone in his pocket and silently turned on the recording mode. There's a Stark here, and there's another Stark there. This is like 3 worms in one frame, right? Ronan muttered as he recorded the video. Although he didn't understand what 3 worms in one frame meant, Tony Stark number 2 knew that if they didn't take any measures, their plan would be ruined. So, Iron Man number 2 started. As Tony Stark number 2 tapped his chest, the nano Iron Man suit covered his body. Wow, cool. Ronan gave a thumbs up in an exaggerated manner, but this tone made Tony Stark number 2 in front of him feel more and more uncomfortable. Why doesn't it feel like a compliment to him? Hey, what are you doing? However, before Tony Stark number 2 in front of him could make a move, a voice that he was very familiar with sounded from behind Ronan. The original number 1 of this world actually walked behind Ronan. The hand that wanted to put on Ronan's shoulder was also stunned in the air. Woohoo. Ronan quietly stepped back 2 steps so that the phone screen just covered the 2 people. The expressions on the 2 people's faces are amazing. Number 2, who had just completed the transformation, had only 2 words written on his face, embarrassed. And number 1, who had just walked over, showed the same expression as when he saw Ronan's transformation before. What the F asterisk CK? Chapter 5 I convince me? Tony Stark no one's words were obviously meant for Ronan. He never thought that one day he would see a person who looked exactly like him, wearing a similar Iron suit, and looking at each other face to face. More importantly, this fake seemed to be a little more mature than himself. What the hell is this? If I tell you, this is the Bionic Man Tony Stark that I asked someone to build, and then I developed a new set of armor myself. The new armor uses the latest future nanotechnology with more advanced capabilities and combat effectiveness. I call it Mark 85 Nano Armor 2.0, a very powerful and excellent one. Ronan seemed to have found some kind of fun, and he began to talk endlessly about the iron suit on Tony Stark number 2. However, the other party did not seem to understand his kindness. Shut up. Shut up. The 2 Tony Starks spoke almost at the same time, and their tone and voice were exactly the same. One of them was thinking what should I do? The other was thinking who is this? And who is this? Obviously Loki has been caught. Why is there someone who looks exactly like him? Could it be Loki's accomplice? Thinking of this, Tony Stark number 1 gently raised his right hand, and Ronan saw the bracelet on his right hand. Yo. Is the battle about to start? Ronan's eyes became brighter and brighter, and even his camera was aimed at Tony Stark number 1 who was about to transform. He even thought of the title of this video in his mind. Iron Man vs. Iron Man. Isn't this much higher than the Bat vs. Red Underpants? Wit. I know you want to transform, and the bracelet on your right hand is the remote control of Mark 7. And I know everything about you, and I also know what you want to do next. Tony Stark number 2 quickly stopped no one's action. This kind of shot of stopping oneself feels a little funny, no matter how you look at it. However, hearing this, Tony Stark number 1 tilted his head, and there seemed to be some hesitation on his face. Seeing this, number 2 immediately took advantage of the victory and pursued. I also know that Mark 7 still has some problems, and is not ready for use. If you transform again, at least the energy power will be insufficient, and Jarvis should have told you that I'm you. Number 2 raised his eyebrows at number 1, and to show his sincerity, he even took off the Iron Man suit. When he saw the moment when the suit was taken off, Tony Stark no one's face was more confused. This suit only existed in his imagination. To be more precise, it should be that even the folder has not been created yet. Tony, are you okay? We are going down. At this time, Steve Rogers' voice came from not far away. The atmosphere, which had been relaxed, suddenly became tense. Even Ronan, with interest, turned the camera to the other side. Not only did he not feel nervous at all, he even wanted to add fuel to the fire with excitement. As for the future, will the timeline change? Ronan didn't care at all. Anyway, Ancient One didn't stop him, which meant that everything Ronan did was reasonable and legal. At least in his opinion, there was no problem with doing so. It's over. It's over. You've been discovered. Should we run away? Scott Lang, who had been hiding on Tony Stark No 2's shoulder, finally showed up. You know, he was also scared by the scene just now. Now they only have two choices. Either fight or run. The former may mean that they will have to face the entire Avengers, while the latter will make their purpose of this trip fail. No matter how you look at it, their plan may be ruined. However, Tony Stark number 2 did not speak, but just looked at the other self with his eyes. Choose to believe in yourself? To be precise, believe in your own IQ? Ronan stared at the two people with interest. This feeling is too good. Tony Stark number 1 looked at number 2 seriously, then turned around slowly. It's okay, Captain. You go down first. I will go with a Rubik's Cube later. I need to find a safe way to return the Rubik's Cube to SHIELD. Steve Rogers frowned, but didn't say much in the end. Although he didn't know what Tony Stark was doing, he still chose to believe him. At least now, the relationship between the two is pretty good. Okay, I'll wait for you downstairs. After saying that, Steve Rogers glanced at Tony Stark, then turned his gaze to Ronan. Although I don't know who you are, I still thank you. Steve Rogers pointed at Ronan and nodded solemnly. Ronan clenched his right fist and hammered the left side of his chest, then pointed at Steve Rogers as well. He looked like we are good brothers. After saying all this, Steve Rogers took the elevator and walked downstairs. The atmosphere froze again. Okay, who are you? Or, are you me? Tony Stark number 1 asked, after watching Steve Rogers walk into the elevator. Tony number 2 was about to answer, but he seemed to suddenly think of something. Sorry, I can't tell you all this. As for me and you should know the so-called time and space paradox, so there are many things I can't tell you. What I can tell you is that I came here for something I have to do. Tony Stark number 2 took a deep breath. He could only explain many things this way. After all, once Tony number 1 knows too much, the future may change greatly. Time and space paradox? Do you want to convince me with this statement? Tony number 1 frowned. This is not a good reason. However, this is the most Tony number 2 can say. So, this is a very strange phenomenon. This reason is very accurate and intuitive. But this reason, on the one hand, can't convince number 1, and on the other hand, it makes number 2 dare not say more. As a result, the two people are almost looking at each other. Ronan on the side has no intention of helping to explain, but is just concentrating on recording. He is just an ordinary spectator. No way, no way, no one would believe such a perfunctory reason, right? Then I said before that I was a genin who wanted to become Hawkeye. You didn't believe it too? Oh, he is also a master at fanning the flames. As soon as the voice fell, Tony Stark number 2 glared at Ronan fiercely. He didn't know who the man in the Iron Man helmet was. If it wasn't him, he wouldn't be discovered, and the series of nonsense situations behind wouldn't have happened. So, he really wanted to park with Ronan in person. It's just that the current situation does not allow it. Guys, I found Loki's accomplice. He pretended to be me, and he was holding a scepter in his hand. At this time, Steve Rogers' voice came from Tony Stark no one's headset. At the same time, the classic line "guys, I've been discovered" came from No 2's headset. Although the sound in the headset was not loud, it was enough for several people to hear it clearly in this silent space. He's here too? Tony Stark number 1 raised his eyebrows. Number 2 opened his mouth, but could only nod helplessly. Yes, that. American hips. Back quote. Tony Stark number 1 took a deep breath, and then exhaled heavily, his excited heart and shaking hands. He turned around. Whatever you want, I'll pretend I've never seen you. After saying that, Tony Stark number 1 took 2 steps, but soon stopped. He turned his head, but this time he looked at Ronan. He stretched out his hand, pointed at Ronan, and then pointed at his face. Next time we meet, change the sound effect of the helmet, okay? Or, change to Jarvis. That's fine. After saying this, Tony Stark number 1 withdrew his hand somewhat awkwardly, nodded at Ronan, and turned to leave. Ronan stood there and shrugged. The show was over. He gently raised his right foot, and a portal appeared in front of him. He glanced at Tony Stark number 2, and a slight smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Well, to commemorate this day, next time my artificial intelligence will be called Friday. How about it? Chapter 6 Destined? After saying this, Ronan waved to Tony Stark number 2 who was still in a daze, turned around and stepped into the portal. the portal closed, and Ronan's figure disappeared. However, Tony Stark was still immersed in what had just happened, and couldn't extricate himself. Hey, Tony, they have all gone down. We have to continue to complete our plan. At this time, Scott Lang's voice pulled him out of his expression of doubting life. At this time, he was hiding in Tony No One's hair. Friday. Did he just say Friday? Tony Stark looked like he had seen a ghost. Friday was the second artificial intelligence he developed, and his current helper. Since Jarvis merged with Vision and became a real human, Friday replaced Jarvis. However, the young man just now actually called out Friday's name. This made it difficult for Tony Stark to believe that this was a coincidence. Don't think about those things for now. Our mission is to get the cosmic cube. Now they are all about to leave. Scott Lang was obviously the only one who was still awake. After all, one was fighting with himself passionately, and the other was doubting his life. So, he was the only one who was still sober. Hearing this, Tony Stark, who had been immersed in shock, took a deep breath and buried the doubt in his heart. Captain, how is your side? Tony Stark touched the headset and asked in a low voice. I've done it. Myself. How about your side? Steve Rogers' panting voice came from the other end of the headset. Obviously, something very physically demanding must have happened between the two of them just now. We're ready. Let's start the plan. Stark Tower's first floor. At this time, there were already quite a few people standing on the first floor. In addition to Black Widow and a few others, there were also several people in S.H.I.E.L.D. who were responsible for the handover. The leader was Alexander Pierce, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., the spiritual mentor of the current director Nick Fury, and the underground leader of the S.H.I.E.L.D. branch of the Hydra Society. Ronan, who was standing not far away, was wearing a black suit, and black sunglasses covered most of his face. He looked like a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. However, the faint smile on his lips betrayed him. A high-ranking member of Hydra became the spiritual mentor of the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was funny to think about it. Especially now, the Avengers and others were going to hand over 2 Infinite Stones to them. It was interesting to think about it. However, no matter what, Ronan had already turned on the camera mode. Although Tony Stark number 2 knew everything, number 1, who was about to hand over to Alexander Pierce, didn't know yet. He was looking forward to the day when Tony Stark number 1 knew the other party's true face, and when he took out this video, what kind of expression would Tony number 1 have? It was exciting to think about it. Thinking of this, Ronan glanced at a security guard who was looking around. There was no doubt that the man was Tony Stark number 2 in disguise. Sure enough, jumping directly from the roof was obviously much faster than taking the elevator down. Ahem. When he approached Ronan, he suddenly heard Tarkov's. This sound scared Tony Stark. Ronan almost couldn't hold back his anger when he saw the typical guilty look of a thief. At this time, the elevator lit up again, and Tony Stark number 1, who everyone had been waiting for a long time, finally arrived. Scott, the target has appeared. It's up to you now. Tony Stark number 2, who pretended to be a security guard, muttered to himself. In a place where no one could see, Scott Lang followed Tony Stark no one's clothes and went directly into the reactor on his chest. At this time, Tony Stark number 1 had been stopped by Alexander Pierce. The good show was about to start. While several people were arguing, Scott Lang completed his task. The sudden power outage made Tony Stark number 1 twitch all over, and the box in his hand fell to the ground. This sudden problem made everyone extremely panic. Only Loki, who was standing in place, saw the box on the ground fly to another direction by itself. Tony Stark number 2 walked up quickly, picked up the box on the ground, and prepared to evacuate. Ronan, who was standing aside, had no intention of stopping him. In fact, from the beginning, he didn't want to stop Tony number 2 from taking the box. He wanted to see if Tony Stark would be different from the original plot, if he hadn't seen his father, and hadn't heard Howard Stark's words. At the end of Avengers 4, Tony Stark snapped his fingers with his own life in exchange for everyone's life. According to Tony Stark's daughter-slave personality, this kind of thing is basically impossible. The only thing that affected him was the trip to New Jersey in 1970. Similarly, that action also made Steve Rogers think about retiring and spending the rest of his life with Peggy Carter. If all this didn't happen, what would it be like? So Ronan chose to stand by and watch. However, something Ronan didn't expect happened. Hulk, who had already walked down the stairs and even ran out of Stark Tower, broke into the window at this moment. A piece of building debris he kicked away hit Tony Stark's second's chest. Bang! Hulk feels very noisy. With a roar from Hulk, the box drew an arc in the air and then fell heavily to the ground. The cosmic cube, which was shining with a faint blue light, coincidentally fell at Loki's feet. Seeing such a scene, Ronan narrowed his eyes. The will of the universe? Or something else? Or was it just another coincidence? He glanced at the ceiling. His eyes seemed to penetrate the building and look at the sky. However, he did not hesitate, and a small teleportation array instantly appeared in his right hand. Loki, who was not far away, had already picked up the cosmic cube. He never expected that at this moment. A hand quietly placed on his shoulder. Swish. With the dizzying scene in front of him, Ronan was brought to a desert by Loki. Loki also landed. Who are you? Obviously, Loki found Ronan the first time he landed. Ronan did not answer him immediately, but took a look at the surrounding environment. If his guess was right, those who claimed to be the Time Management Bureau would appear in a while, right? Sure enough, before Loki asked the second question, a teleportation gate appeared in front of the two people. Several people dressed like special police officers came out of the portal. Ronan couldn't help but twitch his lips. These clothes are really ugly. Chapter 7 Time Management Bureau? Who are you? When he saw the second wave of people appear, Loki's face flashed with dissatisfaction again. Because he clearly saw that the few people who just appeared didn't care about him at all, but took out a device similar to a mobile phone and pointed it at Loki and Ronan. Ronan watched all this with interest. He also wanted to know what the reaction would be if the machine in front of him tested him. Time criminal, Loki, identity confirmed. The female captain glanced at Loki and said this, then turned her head and pointed her eyes at Ronan. The machine in his hand was also pointed at Ronan. Beep, beep. What surprised the female captain was that the machine in her hand actually made a crisp beeping sound. More importantly, the screen that had just detected Loki's detailed identity only left 4 words at this moment. Unable to detect. Who are you? The female captain put down the machine in her hand and her expression suddenly became alert. According to the order they received, a time criminal would appear here, and they were ordered to come and arrest him. Although they confirmed the identity of the time criminal, they didn't expect that there was another witness. Who is this witness? How should I put it? I'm actually a director, Ronan said, with a helpless look on his face. He took out his hidden mobile phone. The camera was aimed at Loki and the female captain. The female captain was obviously a little unprepared for this answer. She had thought of thousands of names for the other party, but she never expected that the other party would answer like this. Hey, it's your turn. According to the script, you should ask me what my dream is now. Looking at the unmoved female captain, Ronan couldn't help but remind her. However, Loki on the side couldn't help it anymore. He regarded himself as a god, but he was ignored again and again on Earth. Especially this time, he was defeated by a few Earthlings. This is a great shame. Enough. How dare you ignore me, the god of trickery of Asgard. I have a glorious mission. However, the female captain didn't want to listen to Loki's self-praise at all. Obviously, the anger from Ronan was seamlessly connected by Loki. On behalf of the Time Management Bureau, I arrest you for violating the sacred timeline. Put your hands up and follow us. As soon as the voice fell, several soldiers around the female captain pulled the bolt of their guns. Ronan couldn't help rolling his eyes. If he were to say, this Time Management Bureau is really not cool. They can manage time, but they have such weapons to arrest people. You are called the Time Management Bureau, so you should either use some fancy skills to shock people at first sight, make them stand there in a daze, and then be taken away obediently. Or you should tell some of Loki's little secrets expressionlessly to stun the other party. No matter how you look at it, these people in the Time Management Bureau are so low. No wonder they were challenged by the female Loki alone. Enough of this day. I've had enough of you, a bunch of fully armed idiots. The action of several people pulling the bolt of their guns obviously reminded Loki of a scene when he was surrounded by several Avengers. At that time, he was lying on the ground, weak, pitiful and helpless. Especially there was a Hulk on the opposite side who could treat him as a toy and throw him around. That word puny god was a murderous blow. I'm warning you for the last time, get out of my way. As a god of Asgard, I won't fall in the same place twice. Loki took 2 steps forward with a bad look on his face. He wanted to take the cosmic cube that fell on the ground. However, the female captain was not panicked at all. She swung her right hand suddenly and hit Loki's right face accurately with the stick in her hand. At that moment, Ronan clearly saw that Loki's time had changed greatly. This change was only for Loki and had no effect on Ronan or the female captain. The traces of shaking on Loki's face after being hit were visible to the naked eye. The female captain walked forward and put something similar to a collar around Loki's neck. I hope you can learn something from this fall. Oh, of course. Please hurry up. When she finished speaking, Loki's time returned to normal. Bang. Loki fell to the ground again. The 2 soldiers from the Time Administration Bureau came forward and held Loki firmly. The cosmic cube was also held in the hands of one of the soldiers. Wait. At this moment, Ronan spoke. Several people looked at Ronan at the same time and pointed their weapons at him. You can't take that thing away. My mission is to recover the space stone in your hands. Ronan pointed at the cosmic cube, which was also the purpose of his trip. As the current supreme sorcerer, Ancient One has a time stone as a decoration, so it is reasonable for him, the next supreme sorcerer, to have a space stone, right? It is better for this stone to fall into his hands than into the hands of others. Well, he definitely didn't want this stone. I'm sorry, this space stone is also within our storage range, and these memories should not exist. However, before the female captain finished speaking, she heard a bang. The sound came from behind her. She turned her head quickly, but found that Ronan punched the female soldier in the chest, and the female soldier flew out immediately. And the space gem also fell into Ronan's hands. You talk a lot of nonsense, but I don't have time to talk nonsense with you, Ronan said, tossing the cosmic cube in his hand. Well, it feels good. He was talking about the Rubik's Cube. Damn it. Let's do it together and eliminate him. The female captain cursed and immediately gave the order to open fire. The remaining soldiers pulled the triggers in front of their fingers and fired wildly at Ronan. A large number of bullets poured out instantly. Hey, you guys are like this, making me feel more like a villain. I'm just a high school student. Ronan sighed and saw him cross his hands and stretch his muscles. The bones made a crackling sound, which also merged with the sound of bullets. Bang, bang, bang. Continuous bullets bombarded Ronan, forming an extremely dense firepower network. If it were an ordinary person, I'm afraid he would die. However, Ronan was completely different. In the hail of bullets, he made a C, a 1, and a wood. In short, he dodged all the bullets. The bullets that were dodged bombarded the desert, raising a cloud of dust, instantly blocking Ronan's sight. Taking this opportunity, the female captain flew forward and hit Ronan's face with the stick-like weapon in her right hand. As long as Ronan was hit by the stick, he would definitely snap. The next second, a scene that shocked the female captain happened. Ronan actually grabbed the female captain's stick with his hand. Yes, it was the stick-like weapon. How is it possible? The female captain exclaimed subconsciously. How is it impossible? Haven't you heard of a kind of ability from heaven? No, it is the ability to dodge all attacks. Have you heard of the observation haki? Ronan's face was full of helplessness, but this did not prevent him from using his right hand to force the stick away from him bit by bit. Also, the rules of the underworld are that you don't hit someone in the face. After all, my face is very immersive. However, the female captain was dumbfounded. Why was she not attacked by time? Before she could figure out why, she felt a strong force coming, and then she lost control of her weapon. Looking at the aggrieved, unwilling, and shocked expression on the female captain's face, Ronan couldn't help but sigh. Why do you look like a villain to me? As the next supreme sorcerer, I'm a positive character. A person with thick eyebrows and big eyes like me will not easily betray the organization's training. Ronan glanced at the stick in his hand and threw it on the ground. Seeing that the weapon she was proud of was thrown away so casually, the female captain also showed an angry expression. I know you are anxious, but don't worry. If I guess correctly, your so-called time attack is only effective against time offenders like him. The time you manage is just a part of the timeline. If there are people who are beyond the established future, you will be able to deal with them. Ronan pointed at Loki, who was still dizzy. The meaning was very clear. This so-called weapon that can eliminate time offenders is completely useless to him. The reason why it is useful to Loki is just because the arrival of Tony Stark #2 and others accidentally changed the fate of Loki's established future. Moreover, their power is probably very little. Otherwise, whether it is Tony Stark #1 who met with his future self, or Steve Rogers #1 who fought passionately with his future self, they can be regarded as indirectly affecting the established timeline. Then why didn't the Time Management Bureau catch them and reset the timeline? To put it bluntly, they are just an organization that bullies the weak and fears the strong. Otherwise, why don't they reset those protagonists? After all, they have strength and background to get involved. As for Loki's background, Asgard, it will be the Ragnarok soon. While Ronan was explaining, another portal slowly opened behind Ronan. A strong black man walked out of the portal. In an instant, the soldiers of the administration, who had just been stern and cold, seemed to be cast under a spell and turned into puppets one after another. They opened the portal and walked in with Loki. Ronan turned around, and when he saw the man in front of him, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Conqueror Kang? Chapter 8 The Conqueror Kang? The famous Kang the Conqueror bowed slightly with a kind smile on his face. He looked harmless. However, Ronan was very alert. When he watched the TV series in his previous life, he knew a little about Kang the Conqueror. The Kang the Conqueror in the comics was a very powerful existence, perhaps even 50-50 with Thanos or even stronger. But the Kang the Conqueror in that TV series was pitifully weak. To be more precise, he wanted to die. According to the current situation, this Kang should be the latter. I'm sorry, the future Sorcerer Supreme. I apologize for the behavior of my subordinates. Kang the Conqueror lowered his posture very low, as if he was really apologizing for what happened before. However, Ronan was more alert. The strength of Kang the Conqueror was mentioned a little in the TV series in his previous life. Just the ability similar to teleportation was already very tricky. As the mastermind behind the Time Administration, this ability alone might not be enough. The famous Conqueror Kang, it seems that I really underestimated the background of the Time Administration. Ronan raised his head and stated something very appropriately. First, he said the other party's name, which meant that Ronan knew him and understood him. Then, he said that he underestimated the Time Administration, which meant that Ronan did not know the specific situation. Although he didn't know if he could deceive the other party, Ronan had to try it anyway. Although I have this name, I'm afraid I'm not the one you know. Conqueror Kang smiled slightly, looking very humble. So, my appearance, does it require you, the big man behind the scenes, to take action to eliminate these effects? Ronan remained calm. The more humble the other party was, the more vigilant he had to be. If a very strong person is very arrogant, it is normal, because the other party's strength is there. But if a very strong person is very humble in front of others, either he is pretending, or he is really humble. But no matter which one it is, this kind of person is more difficult to deal with than the arrogant one. No, I'm just apologizing. In my memory, I've seen 3 Supreme Sorcerers, and they've all transcended the timeline. This is the ability of the Supreme Sorcerer, and it's also their responsibility. But you're different. Conqueror Kang slowly raised his head and looked directly at Ronan. He seemed to want to see something in Ronan's eyes. Unfortunately, Ronan hadn't taken off his sunglasses yet. What's different about me? Ronan looked a little strange. Did he see that I was the protagonist so quickly? Should I say, he's worthy of being Conqueror Kang? Although you are the Supreme Sorcerer of this timeline, you, who haven't become the Supreme Sorcerer yet, have already transcended this timeline. I can't see your past or your future from you. You're the most unique one. Conqueror Kang smiled, as if he didn't see Ronan's expression. Transcend this timeline? Ronan's expression moved. Why did he say this timeline? And what does transcendence mean? I know you have a lot of questions to ask, but I don't know the answers either. What I said is just the part stored in my memory, but there is no relevant answer. Conqueror Kang shook his head. He knew what Ronan wanted to ask. So, the purpose of your coming here is to tell me these riddles? Ronan curled his lips. This knight doesn't look like a good guy. It's obvious that he wants to destroy my Taoism. This guy deserves to die. No, I just came to apologize. Besides that, I have a small request. Conqueror Kang bowed slightly, and this time his posture was lower than before. Request. Tell me. Ronan didn't refuse. If it can be done, see if it is beneficial to you. If it is beneficial, do it. If it is not beneficial, don't do it. If it is something that cannot be done, it is up to you whether to do it or not. Anyway, he has nothing to lose. When you see me next time, please kill me. After saying that, Conqueror Kang bowed heavily to Ronan. Without waiting for Ronan to agree or not, the whole person was wrapped by the portal and disappeared in an instant. Damn. Looking at the disappearing figure of Kang the Conqueror, Ronan couldn't help but raise his middle finger. What do you mean? You just wanted to destroy my Taoism, and now you want to rely on me to do things for you? No benefits? Could it be that this Nico took the benefits given to him by others and took kickbacks for himself? However, no matter what, Ronan could only shrug his shoulders. Kill him next time we meet. Then let's talk about it next time we meet. After that, a golden secret door appeared, and the destination was the familiar rooftop of the New York Temple. Ronan, who successfully completed the set goal, hummed a little song and returned to the rooftop of the New York Temple again. Completely different from his memory, Bruce Banner not only did not leave, but the time gem was still hanging on the neck of the Ancient One. Intact. Woohoo. Did the talks break down? Ronan took off the sunglasses on his face and looked at Bruce Banner with interest. Bruce Banner looked sad. Could it be that his existence made the Ancient One not believe in the prophecy of Doctor Strange? So not only did they not give them the Time Stone, but they also regarded Bruce Banner as a liar? If that's the case, it would be interesting. Ronan, you're finally back. When Ronan landed, Bruce Banner's gloomy face finally changed. He walked up quickly and held Ronan's hand tightly with both hands, as if he had seen a relative. HMM. Ronan was a little surprised. You know my name? Ronan pulled his hand back without a trace. First, he is not Nan Tong. Second, Bruce Banner's hand is too strong and a little numb. Could it be that what he did just now affected the timeline behind, making Bruce Banner suddenly think of himself? Or is there any other reason? I told him that he doesn't know you. At least there are some things he doesn't know. Guyi smiled slightly, and she walked closer to Ronan, as if she meant something. Then this is. Ronan didn't understand what was going to happen. Guyi smiled and shook his head, stretched out his hand to take off the Time Stone, and then put it around Ronan's neck. Ronan was very surprised by her action. What did she mean? Was she asking someone to take care of her? Was she so good that the Ancient One thought that he could take over? Or had the Ancient One already decided to go with Bruce Banner to save the world over there? That didn't make sense. Even if he wanted to go, he had to take the Time Stone with him, right? What about giving the Time Stone to himself? It couldn't be. Suddenly, Ronan seemed to have thought of something. Don't think too much. They came to borrow the Time Stone, and I couldn't agree to it. After all, as the Sorcerer Supreme, one of our responsibilities is to protect the safety of the Time Stone. But his world needs to be saved, and as a Sorcerer Supreme, I must protect this earth. So Ronan, how about you go for me? Chapter 9 I'm still developing, and you want me to play in the decisive team? Ancient One looked at Ronan with a smile, and told him her ultimate goal. What? Ronan opened his mouth wide. Things unfolded in a direction he could not imagine. Although he had expected it before, he was a little confused when Ancient One said it. According to the normal plot flow, didn't the Avengers borrow the Time Stone and fight against Thanos from another world? In the end, Tony Stark #2 snapped his fingers and destroyed Thanos. In the end, Captain America returned all the gems to their original owners, and everything ended happily. I'm afraid Ancient One has seen these plots countless times. Why did they suddenly change the script now? Isn't Ancient One worried about any changes in the future timeline? And, that's Thanos. With his fragile little body now, and a level of Gundam 5, wouldn't it be his own death to face Thanos? Therefore, Ronan shook his head as frequently as an electric fan. No, I still have homework to do. Teacher, you know that, if you don't finish your homework, the school will deduct credits. If the credits are deducted, I can't graduate. And if I can't graduate, I will be a dropout. A dropout. That would be a disgrace to our Kamatage. Ronan instantly found a very reasonable excuse. Bruce Banner on the side seemed to have seen a ghost. Homework? The next Supreme Sorcerer still has to do homework? It doesn't matter, I will ask for leave from the school, and you don't have to worry about homework. I guess they will ask you for help and help you complete this small request, right? Ancient One looked at Bruce Banner with a smile. Bruce Banner reacted immediately and nodded quickly. No problem. Compared to saving the world, I prefer to do high school students' homework. Ronan opened his mouth. He really didn't want to go. What about the steady old dog? He still has a lot of youth to spend. How can he decide such a thing so easily? Teacher, I actually have something very important to tell you. I have a girlfriend at school. She is fair-skinned, beautiful, has long legs, and her family is very rich. You said that if I leave, I will lose my job for the rest of my life. Can you really bear it? Ronan's eyes flashed with a pitiful light. This look is not to say that everyone loves him, but generally people with a little love will want to touch his head. However, Guyi has no heart. Don't worry, your life will not be in danger. You must know that this is the only way for you to become the Supreme Sorcerer, so you must do this. Guyi still smiled and was not disturbed at all. No, you are lying. The script is clearly not written like this. And, teacher, have you forgotten? Since I was 6 years old, you said that you would not tell us what our future fate would be. Is your oath so easily broken? I was so angry. When will these little wizards stand up? Ronan, you have to remember. You are the most special one among us, and the only one. So, don't worry. Remember to communicate with Strange more. Don't rush back. After saying that, Ancient One patted Ronan on the shoulder, turned around, opened the door to the rooftop, and walked down. Her meaning was very clear, not giving Ronan a chance to refuse. Ronan curled his lips. You big guys, why do you always use the same reason to deceive people? It's okay for Conqueror Kang to say so, but why do you say so, teacher? Also, I clearly remember that you told Strange that he was the best among us. But what happened to him in the end? In the mirror space, he was hung and hammered by that little spider. Is this the best one? However, Ronan can only think about these complaints in his heart. He really doesn't want to go. He hasn't developed yet. Why is he going to start the decisive team? It's agreed to let the TCs develop for a while. Why did you, the top laner, rush up with DF twice in a row? This is unfair. Where is the Lord of Heaven? Come from Goose City as soon as possible. New York is not fair. Looking at Ronan's extremely complicated expression, Bruce Banner hesitated and opened his mouth. Obviously, he didn't know what to say. Ronan, can we go now? However, what he said was Ronan's cold face continue to shiver coldly. I'm just a high school student. A high school student with homework. What does saving the world have to do with me? Teacher, can you change your mind? I think Wang is pretty good. He is honest and strong. Or you can think about it again. I don't want this thing either. Ronan held the time gem in his hand and shouted downstairs. However, his cry from the heart did not receive any response. Bruce Banner, standing aside, pulled the corner of his mouth. If you don't want it, why are you holding it so tightly? Are you afraid that I will take things away from your territory? However, in order to take the time gem away, Bruce Banner still has to persuade Ronan. After all, without a gem, their plan cannot be completed. Those lost comrades will never come back. Thinking of this, Bruce Banner's eyes also showed a firmness. This is their last resort. It is also their last chance. If they lose this opportunity, no one knows what their future will be like. They have wasted 5 years. Now, they are only one step away. So, he must convince Ronan. He stepped forward and patted Ronan's shoulder gently. I understand how you feel, especially when facing life-threatening situations. I have also retreated, including Hulk. But now, we have the opportunity to bring them all back, so we must do it. We are ready to lose our lives at any time, even if we really die because of it that day. That's worth it for us. Bruce Banner sighed, and the compassionate expression on his face was clear. It seems that from these conversations, he thought of the comrades who had fought side by side with him. It's a pity that they are all gone. Ronan leaned back slightly, and his right foot involuntarily took a step back. The aggrieved expression on his face disappeared, replaced by a strange look. What's going on? Why did he suddenly become sentimental? Did he have to compose a little song for Bruce Banner? Who? Suona? Or piano? And, did Bruce Banner's words just now mean that he was being talked into? Chapter 10 Time travel is easy for me. Ronan didn't know whether he was talked out of it or not. But on the other side, the atmosphere of Tony Stark and his team was not very good. Tony Stark and his team successfully lost the Space Stone, and the atmosphere was extremely depressing. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Of course, there was also Scott Lang, whose presence was not very strong. Are there any other ways to get the Cosmic Cube? That is, the Space Stone. Steve Rogers looked at Tony Stark sitting in the abandoned vehicle and asked again. No, there are no more. We don't have another chance. Scott Lang seemed a little angry because they just failed. He slammed the door of the back seat with a classic expression of spreading his hands. Backquote, each of us only has this tube of particles. If you use it, goodbye. You can never go home again. Scott Lang stated the most objective conditions. That's right, they only have one tube of particles left, which can only support them to travel once. However, his words gave Tony Stark a new idea. No, there is another way. You can get the Cosmic Cube and replenish new particles. Tony Stark got out of the car. He seemed a little excited. We can take a few more steps on the path of memory, the military base in New Jersey. You know that place. He pointed at Steve Rogers. The captain was not unfamiliar with this place, but was very familiar with it. Because it was in this place that he transformed from a thin white man to the current Captain America. It was the beginning of everything. Are both things there? The original stone and the particles? Steve Rogers took a deep breath and confirmed again. I'm sure. I remember that place. There are both things there. You know why I know. Tony Stark looked at Steve Rogers. Just as the two people looked at each other affectionately, a space gate that they were very familiar with quietly appeared beside them. The three people also turned their attention to this portal. Steve Rogers raised his shield, and Tony Stark also reached his hand to his chest. Scott Lang also put on a helmet. But what they didn't expect was that it was Bruce Banner who emerged from the portal. Oh, and the young man wearing an Iron Man helmet behind him. You are the one just now. Scott Lang recognized Ronan at a glance. Let me introduce him. He is the Supreme Sorcerer of this world. The next Supreme Sorcerer, Ronan. Bruce Banner, who was kicked by Ronan, immediately changed his words. The current one just gave Ronan a pitfall task, but Ronan had no intention of replacing him. After all, he couldn't beat the Ancient One. The next Supreme Sorcerer. For this title, several people seemed a little surprised. You are Strange? Tony Stark blurted out. Could it be that they met a younger version of Strange? No, your name is Ronan? Tony Stark suddenly thought of Bruce Banner's address just now. Ronan shrugged and said softly, Friday, open the mask. Yes sir. The familiar female voice made Tony Stark's eyes go dark. As the sound of the 5-cent sound sounded again, the mask opened, and Ronan's face appeared in front of several people. And the word Friday he said also made several people look at Tony Stark. Everyone knows that Friday is Tony Stark's second artificial intelligence after the appearance of Vision. Don't look at me, I don't know anything. Tony Stark's eyes were not only dark, but his face also began to darken. He remembered what Ronan said in Stark Tower before. He never thought that Ronan would change so quickly. My name is Ronan, the next Supreme Sorcerer of this world. I'm here to escort this thing and ensure that it is brought back safely. As he said, Ronan made a seal with an expressionless face. The eye of Agamotto on his chest slowly opened, revealing the time stone inside. Humph. If this handsome guy's not happy, don't expect to have a good face. Seeing the appearance of the time stone, the expressions of several people relaxed slightly, but they also looked at Bruce Banner again. They didn't care about Ronan's face. Bruce Banner shrugged his shoulders, as if to say, that's just the way it is. Okay. Let's not dwell on what happened for now. Now that we have the time stone, we must solve the previous troubles. Tony Stark took a deep breath. The most important thing at the moment is to get the space stone and more particles. If we can't get the space stone, it would be meaningless to dwell on who Ronan is. Captain, do you believe me? Tony Stark looked at Steve Rogers, and the two continued to look at each other affectionately. Steve Rogers took a deep breath and finally nodded sharply. Click. There was a crisp sound. Several people looked towards the source of the sound. Ronan was holding a mobile phone and looking at them expressionlessly. Why are you looking at me? Keep talking. After saying that, he put the phone back into his pocket and pouted. Well, at least it's a game. The next time Tony Stark makes an anti-mage armor, he will threaten him with this photo. TSK. These two are almost kissing. At this point, Steve Rogers didn't have time to care about Ronan's weird words. He threw the scepter in his hand directly to Scott Language. Scott, you and Bruce go back first. Wait until we get the particles, then we will be responsible for picking him up. After that, the two of them pressed the watch on their wrists and disappeared in an instant without waiting for others to speak. They went to New Jersey in 1970. Scott Lang held the scepter, his face full of disbelief. Aren't these two afraid of not being able to come back? So, your so-called time travel doesn't require that kind of white clothes? Ronan crossed his arms and raised his eyebrows. Scott Lang's face darkened. He actually forgot about this. This dress was specially prepared by them for time travel. Without it, the human body can't withstand the tearing of time travel. Then will you give us the gem? Bruce Banner took a deep breath. Ronan looked at him like an idiot, and the meaning was already very clear. Although he didn't want to go, he couldn't disobey the order of the Ancient One. Who knows if he will be treated like the wizards of Kamataj who take turns to challenge them 1,000 times after he returns. Okay, you wait here for him, and then go, after he comes back. Oh fuck, I hope he can bring enough particles back. Bruce Banner slapped his forehead with a happy expression on his face. No one could have imagined that things would turn out like this. This was completely different from their plan. No need, you go back first. I'll wait for them here. There are some things you need, but as the next Supreme Sorcerer, I don't need them. Ronan curled his lips. Although he was unhappy, he still had to pretend. Seeing Ronan like this, the two looked at each other, but they had no choice. Although they didn't believe what Ronan said. So, they could only hope that Tony Stark and the others would think of this. Otherwise, a bottle of particles would be wasted. Thinking of this, the two pressed the watches on their wrists at the same time and disappeared instantly like the two people before. Traveling through time seems so simple. Cool. Just as this thought ended, the next second, Tony Stark appeared again. There seemed to be a little more smile on his face. He seemed to have matured a lot. If the previous Tony Stark still had the confusion and worries of being a father, then now he has finally evolved into the final form. Should we say that it is worthy of the bonus of the father's love buff? Wow, the old version of Iron Man is indeed faster than when he was young. Should it be said that it is a necessary process for men? Ronan pursed his lips, as if he meant something. Tony Stark's face changed, and the smile on his face changed instantly. He snorted coldly and threw the box in his right hand to Ronan. Put on this suit, we are going to start time travel. Don't be surprised, everything is real. Tony Stark pouted arrogantly, but he obviously wanted to show off something to Ronan. Time travel is a very high-end thing for many people. Who hasn't dreamed of traveling back to decades ago and changing their own destiny? However, Ronan took a look at the box in his arms and shook his head. Time travel is very simple for me. I don't need these burdens at all. I just need. Ronan glanced at the panel in his system. Arcane Gate +2, +1 feature. No need for hanging rings and hand gestures. You can open the Arcane Gate at will to travel. +2 feature. You can travel through parallel universes and timelines, but you need to manually confirm the time. There is a 6-month cooldown time for each use. Like this. As Ronan's right hand drew arcs, a golden portal appeared in front of the two people again. On the other side of the door, those familiar faces of Tony Stark looked here one after another. Ronan saw surprise in their eyes. Ronan turned his head and looked at Tony Stark. It's here. At this time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 11. Can't be a dog who cuts off chapters. What the hell? Just as Ronan crossed the portal, Bruce Banner and several others exclaimed. Ronan shrugged calmly and turned to look at Tony Stark behind him. Why don't you come in? If you don't come in, I'll close the portal. As soon as he finished speaking, Ronan instantly squatted down and dodged a kick from behind. Then he turned around and swept across the opponent's other supporting leg. Bang! The other short leg was swept away by Ronan directly. Black Widow's movements were also extremely fast. She used the force of falling to do a Thomas turn on the ground and successfully stabilized her body. TSK. Ronan pouted with some disgust. Doesn't she know that Kamatach trains melee mages? Except for the best one. It's embarrassing for the Supreme Sorcerer to be beaten by a little spider in his home court. Hey, don't do it. We are all family. Bruce Banner hurried forward and separated Ronan and Black Widow. Tony Stark also emerged from the portal. Is he the Sorcerer Supreme you were talking about? The one who seems to know you very well. The slightly hoarse voice of the Black Widow sounded, and it seemed that her tone was a little unfriendly. However, Ronan suddenly turned around and looked at the intact Black Widow in front of him. Something was wrong. No. Shouldn't you die on the planet for me? Ronan frowned, and it was obvious that things were a little different from what he imagined. Under normal circumstances, the current Black Widow and Hawkeye had already gone to the planet Vormir, and in order to obtain the Soul Stone, the two had to choose one to die. In the end, Black Widow chose to die and left Hawkeye behind. When watching the movie in his previous life, Ronan felt that something was wrong. You know, the way to obtain the Soul Stone is to sacrifice the beloved person to get it. But Hawkeye has a wife and children. Can the friendship between him and Black Widow really be more important than the affection and love between his wife and children? Now, Black Widow is not even dead. What's going on? Why do I have to die on for me? What do you want to say? Black Widow frowned. She didn't seem to understand what Ronan said. Hearing this, Ronan raised his eyebrows. So, how did you get the Soul Stone? In Ronan's cognition, since they can get the Soul Stone, they must have learned from the Red Skull that they must exchange the life of their loved ones for the stone. Therefore, one of Hawkeye and Black Widow must die. Black Widow is standing here, so the one who died must be Hawkeye, unless something unexpected happens. When we arrived at Vormir, a man wearing a black robe and a hood appeared. He asked us why we came, and after getting the answer, he gave me the Soul Stone. He also said something inexplicable. Black Widow looked at Ronan with a strange expression, as if she was recalling something. Wait. Just gave them the Soul Stone. What does this mean? What did he say? Ronan's eyes lit up, and he asked impatiently. The plot changed from this moment on, which is much more interesting. He said that he was just trying to make up for the mistakes he made in the past. If it weren't for him, the future might not have changed. The person who should have survived would not have died. After he said this, he disappeared. This sentence made Ronan ponder. Make up for the mistakes made in the past? What does this mean? Since the other party can get the Soul Stone, it means that a loved one has been sacrificed. Or, the other party is already powerful enough to break the rules of the Infinity Stones, and can get the Soul Stone without meeting the conditions. Then why did they help Black Widow and Hawkeye? Interesting. Ronan touched his chin, thinking about the possibility of something. Okay, let's discuss this issue later. Although we have collected 6 pieces of raw stones now, we still need another thing. The glove. At this time, Tony Stark seemed to have recovered from the previous shock. For someone like Ronan, who can travel through time by just raising his foot, this kind of thing seems almost impossible to them. Even Strange, whom he knows, can't do it. However, the child in front of him, who looks only in his teens, did it perfectly. Yes, that glove. Bruce Banner also thought of this. So, I need someone to help me recall the specific structure of the glove. Thor, can you help me? Tony Stark pointed at Thor, who had gained several pounds. Thor nodded. This glove was one of the treasures of Asgard, and he still remembered it. So, several people rushed to the laboratory in a hurry. With 6 infinity stones, they only had the glove left to reach their goal. Although Ronan couldn't figure out how these people used science to solve metaphysical problems. But, just watch. Okay, the smart people are busy. Would you like to eat something? Or have a cup of coffee? Steve Rogers exhaled lightly and made a gesture to Ronan. After all, they still needed the time stone on Ronan's neck. Thanks, give me a cup of coffee, no creamer and sugar. Ronan nodded, and then he turned his eyes to the Black Widow standing beside him. Well, it's so big. Ahem. He was talking about age. Similarly, Black Widow has been staring at him. After all, among these people, only Ronan is an outsider, and the others are all insiders. Moreover, he is holding the most important time gem, so he cannot be ignored. Can you do me a favor? Ronan suddenly said. Help? What favor? Black Widow was also a little unprepared. The two of them have only known each other for a few minutes. Why do you need to help? Can you help me recall everything you saw on Vormir at that time? Just recall it, no need to tell me. Ronan stretched out his right hand. Looking at Ronan's outstretched right hand, Black Widow subconsciously took a step back. Ronan raised his eyebrows at her, and under Black Widow's gaze, Ronan put his hand on her shoulder. Okay, recall now. Recall what you saw at that time, the environment, the people, or the feelings at that time. With Ronan's guidance bit by bit, Black Widow's memory also emerged bit by bit. In the doubtful eyes of several people, in front of Black Widow, a little golden light began to appear. Soon, the golden light slowly expanded and formed a circle. When Black Widow opened her eyes again, the planet Vormir, where she had just been, appeared before her eyes. She turned her head in surprise, and looked at Ronan behind her. Ronan shrugged. If you don't understand something, just ask in person. It's not a good thing to be a misunderstanding dog. Chapter 12 Use me against me? Ronan stepped through the teleportation array and came to this famous planet. Although it is known as the Kingdom of Death at the center of the universe, it is not as solemn and murderous as imagined. Instead, it seems very peaceful and tranquil. There are mountains and waters, and there is not even a harsh environment except for the biting cold wind and snow. Ronan looked behind him and found that Captain America and others had no intention of catching up. So he shrugged and waved to close the secret door behind him. Ronan, you are here after all. As the secret door closed, a slightly hoarse voice sounded from behind him. A person wearing a black robe, a black hood, and a face covered came out. Ronan raised his eyebrows. This dress is very similar to the Red Skull in his memory. However, there is a big difference. At least the one in front of him looks more like a real entity, not like the Red Skull, whose robes are all virtual. You know my name, so you deliberately wanted to lure me here? You are really willing to spend money to use the soul gem as bait. Ronan was not panicked. Obviously, he had thought about this possibility from the beginning. As the saying goes, you can only gain if you give. Since you want a fish, how can you not prepare bait? However, the other party's bait is a bit too extravagant. If you want to understand it this way, there is nothing wrong. After all, I did want to see you. The hooded man did not deny that his purpose was to attract Ronan to Vormir. Therefore, he gave the soul gem to Black Widow. Until now, an idea came to Ronan's mind. It just needs some evidence to confirm it. Okay, I also want to hear what happened that made you exchange the life of your loved one for the soul gem and then lure me here. To be honest, I feel a little honored when I think of this. Although he didn't know the other party's purpose, Ronan knew that things must not be that simple. Otherwise, the price would be too high. However, the hooded man did not answer. Instead, he turned around and opened his arms towards the cliff. It seemed that he was missing something. Ronan was not in a hurry. He could also be sure that the man in front of him was definitely not the Red Skull. Otherwise, there would be no need for him to play tricks on him. In addition, the other party seemed to have calculated that he would come here. If he reasoned along this line, then the other party must know that he would arrive here at this time from the past to the future. Before that, the Ancient One specifically asked Ronan to deliver the Time Stone. Is there something that Ronan doesn't know? Of course, Ronan didn't think that the Ancient One would hurt him. After all, if the Ancient One wanted him to die, there were thousands of ways. Why use this least efficient method? So, there must be something unknown in it. After a long time, the hooded man seemed to have finished his nostalgia. He turned around and looked at Ronan again. You should know that there is an organization called the Time Management Bureau, right? The hooded man asked. Well, I know. Ronan nodded and did not reveal more information. Without knowing the other party's identity and trump card, it is a wise choice to omit information as much as possible. At least, he will not hear the flaws from you. It seems that you are still a little wary of me, but it doesn't matter. I just want to ask you for a favor. When the Time Management Bureau suddenly collapses one day, I want you to stop it from collapsing. Although in your opinion, this organization only intercepted a small timeline for self-entertainment. But if it really collapses, it will also have an indelible impact on the real world. The hooded man looked at Ronan in front of him with a very serious tone. It seems that in his opinion, the Time Management Bureau will have a great impact on the future. At least, the impact is closely related to the hooded man. Sorry, I don't think I have the ability to do such a thing. Ronan shook his head and refused without thinking. Just kidding. What level is he? Doesn't he know it himself? It's okay to pretend to be cool at ordinary times, but when it comes to things like timelines, can a little high school student like him manage it? What's more, the Time Management Bureau is the toy of Conqueror Kang. He has no grudge against her. She is just playing with her own toys. How does that bother Ronan? Why did Ronan rush to make enemies with her? A normal person would not think like this. I'm talking about your future self. Maybe you don't know how powerful your future self is, but I can tell you that your future self is absolutely sure to solve this problem. The hooded man's tone was a little hurried. He seemed anxious. However, Ronan still shook his head and refused. I know you are anxious, but don't be anxious yet. We are not related, and we don't even know each other. Why should I intervene in something I don't know for a stranger? Is it just because you saved the Black Widow? What does she have to do with me? Does her life or death have any impact on me? Ronan spread his hands. He said what was in his heart. Indeed, he looked down on the Time Management Bureau, but that didn't mean he was willing to intervene in these things. Not to mention, whether he had the ability. Even if he had the ability, why would he go looking for trouble? But isn't it the duty of the Sorcerer Supreme to protect the Earth from being invaded? The hooded man was also anxious. When did I become the Sorcerer Supreme? If you want to find the Sorcerer Supreme, you can find Strange in this world. In my world, you can find my teacher, Ancient One. Looking for me, you found the wrong person. Ronan's face gradually turned cold. He might have guessed something. The other party did this, no doubt to ask him for a promise. You will definitely be in the future. The hooded man's tone became more and more urgent, and there was a little hoarseness in his voice. However, Ronan smiled. Then you can ask my future self to help you. If I guess correctly, my future self will definitely reject you just like my current self, right? These words made the hooded man stunned. There is no doubt that Ronan exposed his biggest pain point. Seeing him like this, Ronan was also sure that he guessed correctly. Maybe one day in the future. No, to be more precise, in the future of my world, you met me in the Time Management Bureau and recognized my identity. I have the ability to save that so-called time management, but I chose to reject you at that time. So, you found a way to travel through time and came here. Ronan stepped hard on the snow under his feet. He understood everything. Although I don't know how you knew that the me of today would come to this timeline. But you came and thought of a way to disguise your identity, disguising yourself on for me. You also know that as someone who knows the timeline, I know that the Soul Stone can be found, and that Black Widow must die on Vormir, so you rewrote the timeline. Similarly, you know very well that the words you left behind would arouse my curiosity and make me come here to find you. Everything is in your plan. Your so-called purpose is just to find the me of today and ask for a promise. Because once I inherit the title of Supreme Sorcerer, if I deny my previous promise, it will inevitably cause changes in the timeline, which is the Supreme Sorcerer I will not allow to happen. So, you thought of this. Use my own promise to fight against my future self. Really? What a good plan. Chapter 13 Cruel. No, it's ruthless. At this point, Ronan has analyzed the whole story clearly. The reason why he guessed it so quickly was not because of anything else. It was just because of his understanding of himself. With his understanding of his own character, there are only 8 words. It's none of my business. A lazy, no, steady person like him will definitely not take risks. Because he knows very well that in the world of Marvel, there are countless powerful people, and there are always people who are better than you. The reason why Ancient One can live so long, in addition to her ability to see the timeline clearly, is more importantly, that she doesn't cause trouble. Not afraid of trouble, but also not causing trouble. Ronan is not a child with overflowing curiosity like Strange. As a supreme sorcerer, he doesn't worry about the evil demons outside the domain, but instead hides the identity of a superhero for a high school student. Every time he thinks of this, Ronan can't help but want to complain. It's simply a disgrace to their supreme sorcerer. Why? Why don't you agree? Have you been so cold-blooded from the beginning? Are you going to watch thousands of people? Enough. Ronan interrupted the hooded man's mumbling. This time, the usual smile had disappeared from his face. I don't want to know what will happen in the future, nor do I want to know what I will become in the future. Every day in a person's life will have a new surprise or shock. What I will be like in the future has nothing to do with who I am now. This is Ronan's bottom line. He can know the future of others, but he doesn't want to know his own future. Because once he knows what his future will be like, what's the point of living every day after that? Yes, he is so hypocritical. In this regard, he can tell anyone very frankly. Future ha 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 ha, it doesn't matter. Just because of your words of it doesn't matter, we have to give up everything, even our lives. Is this the future you people are pursuing? This time, the hooded man could no longer suppress his anger and finally roared. There was a hint of tears in his voice, as if his future was going to kill him. However, Ronan was unmoved. So, you haven't even thought about the contingency plan, after being rejected by me? Are you so sure that I will agree to you? Or is your only contingency plan to beat me until I agree to you after I refuse? Ronan crossed his arms over his chest. His calmness formed a sharp contrast with the other party's mania. Perhaps in the eyes of the hooded man, his blood was cold. Hearing this, the hooded man was slightly stunned. He couldn't imagine why Ronan suddenly said such a thing. Could it be that what they discussed before had something to do with this matter? Although I don't know how miserable your future will be, you must have heard a saying. People are selfish. I agree with this sentence very much. You begged me to save your future self, and I refused, so you said I was selfish. But you didn't think that you were also selfish in asking me to save you. Ronan looked at the hooded man not far away with cold eyes, and at this moment, the rebellious psychology of the teenager took effect again. If I don't agree to you, I'm selfish. So, what if I'm selfish? Although he knew that this idea was immature, he had already died once, so it's okay to be willful occasionally, right? I'm selfish too. I'm selfish too. The hooded man seemed a little at a loss at this moment. Ronan's words completely exposed his righteous disguise. What about not invading the earth? What about the responsibility of the supreme sorcerer? In fact, all this was just his idea to coerce Ronan and make him agree to his request. In Ronan's view, perhaps the unknown future will be invaded by visitors from outside the domain. But, what does this have to do with him now? Although it is said that people who don't think about the future will have immediate worries. However, once you worry too much about the future, you will inevitably waste the present. Forget it. It may really be impossible to reason with someone like you. Just think of me as a cold-blooded person. No, I'm such an indifferent person. Ronan shook his head, and he was already planning to leave here. This trip here today not only did not gain anything, but also only made me feel frustrated. It would be better to go and see how Tony Stark and his men use science to explain metaphysical problems. Wait. Just as Ronan was about to leave, the hooded man called him again. Ronan raised his eyebrows, as if asking him what he was going to do. Is it possible that he has to fight again? I want to know why you rejected me. Is it just because you don't have any benefit in this matter? The hooded man seemed to be unwilling to give up. Hearing this, Ronan sighed. Sure enough, I should know. You are very determined to toss yourself into this state for something. Let's put it this way, no benefit is only one aspect. Ronan glanced at the hooded man and couldn't help shaking his head. In this world, don't you do things that have no benefit? The hooded man looked at Ronan as if he wanted to discuss some philosophical issues with him. However, Ronan was not interested. You are discussing the good and evil of human nature with a 16-year-old child and whether or not to do something that is not beneficial. Perhaps you really found the wrong person. Any adult with normal IQ will hesitate when faced with something that is not beneficial. Then, they will most likely refuse. If you really want to find an adult with abnormal IQ, then I recommend you to find a doctor named Stephen Strange, who is the supreme sorcerer of this world. Maybe he can help you. Ronan exhaled, and it can be said that he became more and more angry as he talked about this matter. He didn't even want to repeat his complaints. But, however, before the hooded man could speak, Ronan waved his hand to interrupt him. Listen to me first. This is only one aspect. There is another aspect. Perhaps in your opinion, you can change the established future and reverse the tragic ending by traveling through time. But have you ever thought about it? Perhaps the me who rejected your future has seen you from the beginning. He has rejected you a long time ago. Ronan smiled and stabbed the hooded man in the heart without leaving a trace. However, he hadn't finished his words. Or maybe this attempt is not your first attempt. Maybe this is the second time, maybe the 5th time, or maybe the 10th time. Or, this is the 1000th time, the 10th time. No matter what method you use, what words you use, even if you have successfully convinced me, but the future cannot be changed. Haven't you thought about it? Chapter 14. In the next life, don't pretend anymore. Although Ronan's words were very unpleasant to hear, they were easy to understand. However, such simple words completely dealt the hooded man the final blow. Everyone who traveled through time had an idea, that is, to change the tragic fate of the past, but in fact the results were not very good. Either it would trigger a butterfly effect, or the influence would be erased by the will of the world. Therefore, this is why the Avengers took a different path. They could have traveled through the plot of the restoration of Luo Nan, and then killed Thanos in one fell swoop, and there would not be so many sacrifices later. But they did not do so. Although I don't know why, it makes sense not to do so, whether it is the will of the world or some other reason. So they took a completely different path. They did not modify the timeline, but just use the infinite gems of each time period to modify the final ending. I have to say that this is the best solution to this problem. Now, the hooded man in front of him wants to change the future, but he chose the wrong method. Although I don't know who the other party is, I can be sure that he failed. Is this the ending? I have worked so hard for so long, and it was all in vain in the end? Bang! The hooded man knelt on the ground, his whole body trembling slightly. He couldn't believe that this was the ending, nor did he want to believe it. At this moment, his heart of Tau collapsed. However, Ronan curled his lips. It was you who wanted to trick me at the beginning, right? If I don't retaliate against you, can I still be called Ronan? Although he didn't know if this was the case, reasonable speculation and suspicion are not illegal, right? More importantly, American law cannot apply to him, the future supreme sorcerer. Okay, you've pretended to be awesome. My thoughts are clear too. So I'll leave first. Ronan patted his clothes, not taking a single stitch with him. Oh, no, it should be that all the troubles and regrets were left to this hooded man, and he didn't take anything with him. Who made him like to learn from some villain bosses and have to wear a hat to hide his identity? Don't you know that the more people like this, the more annoying they are? You will regret it. You will definitely regret it. The hooded man suddenly raised his head and looked at Ronan, who turned around, his eyes filled with resentment. The hood that was originally tightly attached to his head was thrown behind him. His face was exposed. No, to be precise, it can no longer be called a face. From the top of his head, a series of protruding blue veins extended and occupied his entire face. These blue veins seemed to form a mask, covering this person's face tightly. However, this mask seemed to grow together with his face. The only pair of eyes that were exposed did not have the concept of pupils. Scarlet dark light occupied his eye sockets. It seemed that he was not a human at all. It was a pity that Ronan did not see this scene. because at this time, he had already crossed the secret door and disappeared on the spot. Ah! The hooded man howled to the sky. His hoarse voice was filled with infinite hatred. It's you. It's you. You destroyed my last hope, Ronan. I will kill you with my own hands, and then kill the people you love the most, little by little, little by little. Kill them all. Puff. The next second after the words fell, a dagger pierced directly into the back of the hooded man. The hooded man's overwhelming hatred instantly turned into disbelief. He turned his head tremblingly and saw an extremely familiar face. Ronan. Ronan blew on his right palm, as if there was something dirty. You said when you say bad things about others, you don't know how to stay away. Look, I found you this time, didn't I? Ronan let go of the dagger in his left hand and showed his palm in front of the hooded man. A golden pattern appeared in Ronan's palm. I hate it most when people say bad things about me behind my back. Especially when someone's identity is mysterious, their speech is incoherent, and their appearance is extremely ugly. Unfortunately, you meet all the criteria perfectly. Ronan took 2 steps back. A little golden light began to appear on the dagger on the back of the hooded man. The hooded man took 2 steps back, raised his arm, and pointed at Ronan. Pa. But what he didn't expect was that Ronan slapped his hand back as soon as he raised it. Don't say me. Are you going to ask why I want to kill you? Ronan sighed, looking very helpless. He looked at the dying hooded man, and his helpless expression turned into a sneer. That was just the first reason. I hate people saying bad things about me behind my back. The other reason is even simpler. From the first moment I saw you, I knew you had already fallen into darkness. Your aura and appearance are even worse than Dormammu's. This was the most important reason in Ronan's eyes. From the moment he stepped through here, Ronan had already noticed the dark energy that was stirring around him. There was no doubt that the culprit must be the man in front of him. This was why Ronan thought he had bad intentions from the beginning. You can sense dark energy. The hooded man widened his eyes, and black blood began to flow from his eye sockets. Behind him, the golden light on the dagger began to become brighter and brighter. Hey, how should I put it? This is also my talent. My teacher once said that this talent is a gift, but also a disaster. So, I rarely mention it to outsiders. Ronan spread out the palm of his left hand, and the hexagram-like pattern instantly burst into a dazzling golden light. The golden light instantly enveloped the hooded man. Ah! The next second, amidst the hooded man's heart-wrenching screams, a huge force began to tear his body apart. The place where such a terrifying suction force erupted was the pattern on Ronan's left hand. Ronan closed his left eye, blocked his right ear with his right hand, tilted his head slightly to the left, and blocked his left ear with his shoulder. He didn't know why these dark creatures had to scream so miserably before they died. Wouldn't it be better to be quiet? Finally, the hooded man could no longer resist this terrifying force. In this violent tearing, his body turned into a pool of black liquid, all poured into Ronan's left hand. The surroundings were quiet again. 7.26 seconds. Yes, you are the one who resisted the longest time. Ronan glanced at the pattern in his left hand. In his left hand, a pure dark energy seemed to want to break through the seal. However, this was in vain. Experience plus 3000, skill points plus 1, 2 system prompts popped up in front of Ronan's eyes. I have to say that my system is really cool. Apart from the usual reward prompts, he never said a word at other times. However, what surprised Ronan even more was the reward this time. The 3000 experience points were already the highest experience points reward so far, not to mention the 1 skill point. This made Ronan doubt. Who is this hooded man? However, this question only lasted for a second before Ronan put it out of his mind. Things will work out when the time comes. This is his ninja way. He squatted down and picked up the dagger that fell on the ground. Don't be so fond of showing off in your next life, especially in front of me. Chapter 15, The Cat in the Box and the Man Outside the Box. People are actually double standard animals. There are some things I can do, but you can't. Ronan is not a saint. He is just an ordinary high school student. He is just a little more handsome. It seems that you are in a good mood. Did you get the answer you wanted? Just when Ronan returned to the Avengers base, the voice of the Black Widow sounded from behind him. She seemed to have been waiting here. Not bad. At least much better than the last time I came. Ronan turned a semicircle with a smile and walked to a sofa and sat down. These Avengers friends really have to thank the hooded man. Otherwise, I really don't know where to vent my anger. This is your coffee, Captain. I put it here because you haven't come back yet. The Black Widow put a cup of coffee on the table and then sat opposite Ronan. Hiss. Really shaking. Ronan raised his eyebrows and cleverly avoided the two flash bombs. It seems that Black Widow seems to have something wrong. No, to be more precise, this matter is related to herself. Thank you. If I have nothing else to do, I'll go around for a walk. This is the future after all. Take a closer look. Maybe it will help with my homework. Ronan picked up the coffee on the table and toasted Black Widow. It was a way of expressing his gratitude. He didn't intend to have anything to do with the woman in front of him. To be more precise, he didn't intend to have anything to do with anyone in this world. Although Black Widow didn't die, the overall plot had not changed. If the plot develops according to the story, the two leaders of the first generation of Avengers will leave in this battle. One died, and the other grew old. Although Ronan has the ability to do something, he is not willing to do it. Just like he doesn't want to come here. What happened here has nothing to do with him. It's not that he can't do it, but that he doesn't want to do it. For him, a passerby, there is no difference between friends and strangers. Wait. However, Black Widow stopped Ronan. Ronan stopped half of his body and looked at Black Widow with some confusion. I don't know what she means. I want to ask you something. Black Widow looked at Ronan with her eyes, and her tone seemed to be pleading. Ronan opened his mouth and subconsciously wanted to refuse. But in the end, he sat back on the sofa again. Okay, as long as I can answer you. Although Ronan probably knew what the question was, he still sat down. You said before that I should die on Vormir. Can you see the future like Strange? Is my future to die on Vormir? Black Widow asked the question she cared about most. It was indeed this. Hearing this question, Ronan couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He knew that what he blurted out before would definitely be remembered by Black Widow. That's right. If the established future is followed, your ending will be death on Vormir. Ronan nodded. He didn't intend to hide it from Black Widow. The future of Black Widow in this world has completely changed. There is no need to hide it. What about now? Why didn't I die on Vormir? Her focus was not on whether she was dead or not, but why she didn't die. This surprised Ronan. I can't answer you that. Because I don't know why either. Ronan shrugged. This was the truth. He didn't know what the hooded man's purpose was. Such a general statement about the so-called Time Management Bureau was related to certain moments in the future. Even Ronan himself didn't understand this, let alone tell Black Widow. So, does this matter have any impact on the future? Or, does it have any impact on what we are doing? Black Widow took a deep breath. Ronan seemed to see a lot of complicated emotions on her face. There was happiness, uneasiness, surprise, and trepidation. It seemed that at this moment, she had already played several movies in her mind. Sorry, I can't tell you about the future either. As for the impact, Natasha, can I call you that? Seeing Black Widow nod slightly, Ronan continued, you should have heard of Schrödinger's cat theory, right? Ronan said a theory that is more easily understood in the scientific community. Although Black Widow's education is not high, after all, she has lived for so many years, and she is relatively clear about common theories like this. In 1957, a man named Whoever had proposed a very interesting theory. When humans opened the box, the whole world split into two versions of it. In one world, the atoms decayed, and the cat died. In the other world, the atoms did not decay, and the cat was still alive. These two worlds will evolve completely independently of each other, like two parallel lines. This is the famous multi-world interpretation. In the mouth of us professionals, this is called a parallel universe. Ronan took another sip of coffee, this time because he talked too much, and his mouth was a little dry. However, looking at her eyes, that both understood and didn't understand, Ronan couldn't help but sigh. For Black Widow, this passage was not difficult to understand literally, but it was beyond her scope of understanding. I don't understand. Black Widow shook her head. She still couldn't integrate her experience with this explanation. Why did Ronan say that she would die, but she didn't die? Ronan sighed. Although she also knew that this passage was not easy to understand. However, this was the best explanation that he, a poor high school student, could give. Natasha, his meaning is very simple. You are the cat in the box. Everything that happened on Vormi represents the condition of whether the atom decays. And he is the person outside the box. Tony Stark's voice sounded from behind them. At some point, Tony Stark had already stood at the door, watching them quietly. Ronan smiled slightly, but shook his head. No, I'm not that capable yet. Just as he spoke, Ronan stopped talking, and the smile on his lips gradually disappeared. For some reason, the appearance of Ancient One appeared in front of him. Before leaving, that meaningful smile. Just what? Black Widow asked curiously. Nothing. What I want to express is, I'm also a cat in a box. Chapter 16. Don't snap your fingers next time. Fortunately, Ronan's slight pause did not arouse the suspicion of the two people, at least on the surface. Tony Stark shrugged, walked to the counter, and poured himself a glass of wine. I haven't seen you for more than half an hour. How come you are discussing the problem of quantum field? Is there a physicist here that I don't know? It must be said that Tony Stark is really good at being sarcastic. At least when he said this, Ronan couldn't help but roll his eyes. What should I do if I really want to beat him up? Otherwise, let him feel the roller coaster that Bruce Banner experienced before. Since he can be on par with gods with his mortal body, it must be no problem for him to have such a small excitement, right? Let's do it. Ronan turned his head, held the back of the sofa with his left hand, and looked at Tony Stark with a smile. Hold your glass firmly. After saying this, Ronan blinked very kindly. What? Tony Stark opened his hand, and before he could figure out what Ronan meant, he felt his feet empty. Ah! Screams suddenly sounded. Black Widow watched Tony Stark fall into the floor, and the next second he fell from the ceiling, and then fell into the circle on the floor again accurately. This cycle repeats. The two yellow circles on the floor and ceiling look very much like the portals Ronan used before. Could it be that Black Widow looked at Ronan? Ronan shrugged and turned back to continue tasting his coffee. This action is self-evident. It's a pity that neither Bruce Banner nor Tony Stark was judged as an enemy in the system's judgment. Otherwise, Ronan's experience could be brushed up. Maybe at least from now on, these people have not regarded Ronan as an enemy. Finally, after turning more than a dozen times, Tony Stark finally pressed the button on his chest as he wished. The steel suit made of nanotechnology covered Tony Stark's body like layers of scales. But the aircraft under the steel suit started. Unfortunately, due to inertia, Tony Stark finally took a roller coaster and finally stopped in the room. Bang! The wine glass hit the top of his helmet. Fortunately, the wine glass was intact. You are right, Mr. Stark. There are no physicists here. Ronan glanced at Tony Stark, who had stopped steadily and took a sip of coffee. But there is a young and frivolous wizard here. That one. Tony, are you performing acrobatics? Bruce Banner and others who came after hearing the noise walked in. After all, Tony Stark's scream was too loud before. Even in the laboratory, they heard it clearly. When they saw Tony Stark for the first time, they saw him with a cup on his head. So, they subconsciously thought that he was performing acrobatics. Oh no, it should be said that he was showing off his battlesuit. No, Mr. Stark just wants to discuss with me about the universal gravitation proposed by Mr. Newton. After all, Mr. Newton is a famous physicist. Ronan winked at Tony Stark again, picked up the coffee cup in his hand, and saluted from a distance. Although Ronan is not a physicist, he still knows some very basic laws. Ronan's knowledge of physics is not as good as Tony Stark's, so Newton is a big deal. Right? When the apple fell on Newton's head, Newton discovered universal gravitation. Now that the wine glass fell on Tony Stark's head, he would also find that Ronan is not easy to mess with, right? Tony Stark took off his helmet and exhaled. He widened his eyes. The feeling just now was a bit too exciting. Are you done discussing it? Bruce Banner pointed to the two golden circles on the ceiling and the floor. He was too familiar with these two things. He remembered his previous experience and couldn't help shuddering. Did Ronan also intend to discuss the law of universal gravitation with him at that time? Ronan shrugged and waved his hand to close the two portals. Although it was not so satisfying, it was okay. At least it gave Tony Stark a small warning, so that he could also experience the anger of a poor student. Sure enough, the personalities of you wizards are worse than each other. Tony Stark fell to the ground, as if thinking of another wizard who had already died. He now felt that Strange was much cuter. At least he was not like the one in front of him, who would start fighting without a warning. Okay Tony, now is not the time to talk about this. Ronan, can you give us the time stone? We need to make the Infinity Gauntlet according to the mold of these Infinity Stones. Steve Rogers interrupted this farce. Although Tony Stark has become much gentler after having a daughter, his mouth has not changed much. It would be good to have someone to heal him. Hearing this, Ronan didn't say much. This was his mission. He just snapped his fingers, and the index finger and thumb of his right hand twisted lightly in the air. A green stone appeared between his fingers. This is a time stone. Take it. Remember not to break it, otherwise I won't be able to go back and explain. After saying that, Ronan threw the time stone to Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner never thought that Ronan would throw such a valuable thing casually. So, he caught the gem in a hurry. The moment the gem lay safely in the palm of his hand, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Tony Stark on the side couldn't help but pull the corner of his mouth. Everyone says that I have a bad character, so what about this little brat in front of me? Lawless? Or should we say that he doesn't take things as things? Bruce Banner didn't think so much. The time stone was in hand, which meant that all 6 Infinity Stones had been collected. As long as they finished making the glove and then inlaid the gem. Finally, put on the glove like Thanos and snapped his fingers. Everything will be back. Thinking of this, Bruce Banner rushed to the laboratory with a happy face. Everyone seemed to be infected by his excitement. After all, their companions were all coming back. But none of them noticed that Nebula, who was standing at the back of the crowd, looked a little strange. Only Ronan was keenly aware of this. Has this part of the plot not changed? Ronan thought silently in his heart. In fact, he always had an idea in his heart. If he had killed Nebula in front of him from the beginning, would the Thanos from another world not have followed him? Would the unknown danger behind have been eliminated? However, after this idea flashed through Ronan's mind, he directly denied it. Killing Nebula now would definitely make others hostile to Ronan, and even fight for their lives. And does Ronan have any evidence to prove that Nebula is a substitute? So, if he does this, the solution will definitely not be very good. Ronan, is not a great hero who sacrifices himself for others. He can't do such a thing as letting himself bear the grievances for the safety of these people's lives. This kind of thing is usually only done by the protagonist. As for him, he doesn't have such a close relationship with these people. Thank you. Black Widow stood up and nodded to Ronan. She thanked him, not only because Ronan answered her questions, but also because of what Tony Stark said. However, after she took a few steps, she stopped and turned around. Next time when you cast a spell, try not to snap your fingers. Okay. Chapter 17 The True Supreme Sorcerer. Looking. Ronan could only curl his lips at such a sensitive Black Widow. After all, these people have experienced the snaps equally. I'm afraid that in the past few years, they have been dreaming of Thanos snapping his fingers, right? Therefore, Ronan does not intend to continue to stimulate them. After all, they are still the main force against Thanos, and Ronan does not want to rush to the front as cannon fodder. After showing his muscles a little, Ronan has a certain status in this team. According to Bruce Banner, the new Infinity Gauntlet will take at least 2 days. Therefore, Ronan can move freely during this time. They even suggested that Ronan can use this time to go to other places to take a look. Maybe there are some different surprises in the 2 worlds. Ronan did not comment on this. If there is any difference between this world and his own world, then the possibility is that the supreme sorcerer of this world is Strange instead of himself. If it is himself, how could that little spider be so arrogant? Oh, right. Suddenly, Ronan thought of another thing. The little spider in his own world seems to be different from the little spider in this world. In his own world, Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy were a pair of star-crossed lovers. They were much more mature than this Peter Parker. Thinking of this, Ronan became interested in a place. Himalayas, Kamataj. As a village under the rule of the Supreme Sorcerer, it was also attacked by Thanos' snap. Although several years have passed, some souvenirs of the deceased can still be seen here. Ronan walked on the street, which was no different from his own world. Familiar streets, familiar buildings, and even saw a few familiar faces. Of course, in this world, they do different jobs. Walking through the streets that Strange had walked, Ronan finally stopped in front of an inconspicuous door. This door is very small, even smaller than the doors of most houses. But behind this inconspicuous door, one of the most powerful organizations in the world is hidden. The Sorcerer Group of Kamataj. Dang dang dang. Ronan reached out and knocked on the door. In fact, Ronan also thought about a portal to travel directly here. But then he thought about it and gave up the idea. On the one hand, it is impolite. Although this place is similar to his own world, it does not belong to him after all. He does not want to do things like turning the tables, nor does he bother to do it. On the other hand, if he barges in rashly, he is afraid that he will be regarded as an intruder. Ronan has reason to believe that the king of this world is stronger than the king of his own world. After all, the king of this world can open the door of the secret law without using his hands. Soon, a few seconds after the knock on the door opened. The person who came to open the door was an apprentice wizard whom Ronan did not know. "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" The wizard was full of doubts. "I'm looking for the king." Ronan explained his purpose. Although Kamataj would not refuse outsiders, a normal person like Ronan who came to find someone would feel alert. "I'm sorry, I don't know you. And the king you are looking for should not be here." The apprentice wizard was very alert. But this is understandable. As the gatekeeper of Kamataj, he must be very vigilant. Otherwise, if some people with bad intentions sneak in, it will be troublesome. "I'm a friend of Tony Stark." Ronan smiled slightly and brought up Tony Stark. After that friendly exchange, the two sides should be considered good friends, right? Moreover, Ronan is not a brainless middle school boy. If others reject him, he will show force, which will cause misunderstandings, and then he will challenge the Kamataj of this world alone. After defeating everyone, Ronan stood in the center, looked at the fallen people very coldly, and announced that he was the supreme sorcerer of another world. Ronan felt so awkward when he thought of this plot. If it weren't for his secret door that only allowed travel in Marvel's parallel universe, he would have to go to other worlds to ask those travelers what they thought. Tony Stark. It must be said that, although Tony Stark is a bad mouth, he has a great reputation. At least after hearing this name, the trainee wizard stopped closing the door. "That's right. Tony told me that he and Wang had fought side by side, so they can be considered comrades. And I have some questions to ask Wang." Ronan smiled and nodded. It was normal to ask for advice. After all, Ronan was trained by Wang when he was a child, including homework. Ahem. No matter what, Wang is half of Ronan's master. "Well, come in with me." The trainee wizard hesitated for a moment and finally opened the door to let Ronan in. On the one hand, Ronan moved out of Tony Stark, and on the other hand, the trainee wizard did not believe that Ronan could do anything out of line. After all, this is Kamataj. Walking to the familiar training ground, looking at the countless trainee wizards who were practicing, Ronan couldn't help but nodded. At least in terms of being the supreme sorcerer, Wang seems to be much more suitable than Strange. From this point of view, if I inherit the position of Ancient One in the future, I can let Wang guide my daily work. After all, I'm still a child. Besides, giving subordinates more responsibilities is responsible for their future. Otherwise, how can they make progress in the future? Thinking about it, the two of them walked through the training ground and came to a room. "Master Wang, someone is looking for you." The trainee wizard who led the way brought Ronan to Wang. Wang raised his head and looked at Ronan's unfamiliar face and couldn't help frowning. He had never seen this young man. "You are?" Wang asked. Ronan didn't answer, but waited until the trainee wizard closed the door before he smiled. "Long time no see, Wang. It seems that in this world, you are still a hard-working person." Ronan walked to Wang and sat down in front of him, just like he was at home. Seeing the other party's skillful movements, Wang's puzzled expression became even stronger. Is this person so familiar? Sorry, I don't understand what you mean. We don't know each other, right? We have never even met. Wang has a good memory, and he can be sure that he has never seen the person in front of him. Seeing Wang's movements ready to cast a spell, Ronan couldn't help but curl his lips. What about the multiverse telepathy? Why can witches do it, but you can't? I'm just an ordinary person. Thinking of this, Ronan didn't say much, but just snapped his fingers again. The zipper on his coat opened automatically, revealing an extremely familiar prop. Eye of Agamotto? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 18. The Matter of the Supreme Sorcerer. Can that be called a waste of money? That's right, it's the Eye of Agamotto. In the movie plot, many people mistakenly think that the so-called Eye of Agamotto is part of the Time Stone. But that's not the case. As a magic weapon passed down from generation to generation in Kamatage, the Eye of Agamotto is actually very powerful. Not only can it see through many illusions and crack dark magic, it can even observe the past and the future. That's right, the Ancient One can observe the past and the future, not because of the Time Stone, but because of the ability of this magic weapon. Of course, whether the Time Stone has given some bonus, Ronan doesn't know. Why do you have this? Wang covered his chest with his hands, but the familiar feeling was still there. In other words, the Eye of Agamotto is still hanging on his neck, and has not been lost. So where did the Eye of Agamotto worn by the man in front of him come from? Wang, although you look honest, you are actually a smart man. Otherwise you can't handle my homework. So, use a normal way of speaking, okay? Ronan sighed. He already knew that Wang was playing dumb. Although Wang looks chubby and looks like a simple and honest person, he is not actually like that. Once, he cheated Ronan of 3 Burger King triple burgers under the pretext of helping Ronan with his homework. And they were all combos. Although the homework was very beautiful and the teacher was very satisfied. But he almost cheated Ronan of 2 days pocket money with one homework, which made him feel that he had lost a lot. Therefore, since the triple burger incident, Ronan no longer believed in Wang's simple and honest appearance. However, Wang's expression did not change at all, but remained very serious. Are you strange from another world? No, you look completely different. You are more. At this point, Wang's face changed from serious to weird, as if he didn't know what adjective to use. However, Ronan shrugged his shoulders and looked indifferent. I'm more handsome than him, right? And I look more like the Sorcerer Supreme. Ronan opened his hands and showed his figure. At least from this face, he is more like the Sorcerer Supreme than strange. Well, I must admit that you are more handsome than him. But whether you have the ability of the Supreme Sorcerer, I can't judge. Wang also relaxed, but he was still in a relatively alert state. Although both parties have revealed their identities, to a certain extent, the same person in a parallel universe may have very different personalities, and one may even be kind and the other evil. Wang also knew this. Although Teacher Guyi has no plans to retire, I'm also the heir. In my world, Strange must be a very good surgeon. Ronan shrugged. In his opinion, it is rare to find a supreme sorcerer like him who is both handsome and capable. Of course, let's not talk about Guyi for now. Just compare it with Strange. Teacher Guyi. Hearing this title, Wang was stunned at first, but soon a nostalgic look appeared on his face. Guyi was also his teacher, and she was also the supreme sorcerer of this world. But unfortunately, she is dead. Seeing the sadness in Wang's eyes, Ronan couldn't help but curl his lips. Teacher, you really hurt people a lot. He was not dead, but he had to fake his death, because he passed the position of the Supreme Sorcerer to Strange. The Supreme Sorcerer, Ancient One, was stabbed to death. Is this reasonable? Isn't this just fooling fools? But these fools really believed it. This is what Ronan can't accept the most. Okay, don't show such a nostalgic expression in front of me. I will feel very strange. After all, in my world, Teacher Ancient One is not only alive and well, but also checks my homework every day. Very strict. Ronan couldn't help but complain. This is also one of the reasons why he has a big opinion. The Supreme Sorcerer, Ancient One, isn't your duty to protect the world? How can you have time to check my homework? This is unreasonable. Homework? Are you still in school? Wang showed an extremely strange expression on his face. Looking at his expression, Ronan couldn't help rolling his eyes. What kind of expression is this? Haven't you seen the candidates for the Supreme Sorcerer doing homework? What's wrong with high school students? Should high school students be discriminated against? How about I take you to that world? Ask the other you what he thinks of a high school sorcerer supreme. Ronan turned his head away, trying not to look at the weird expression on Wang's face. Otherwise, he really couldn't help wanting to hit him. Forget it, I don't plan to travel through the world yet. Wang shook his head quickly, as if he was extremely resistant to this matter. I guess seeing another self would make him feel even more uncomfortable, right? The topic ended here. Wang didn't speak, and Ronan didn't speak either. As a guest, Ronan was observing the layout of the room carefully. Although it was also the Supreme Sanctuary, there were still subtle differences in decoration. At least Strange's taste was very bad. So, why are you here? Looking for Strange? Didn't Stark and the others tell you that Strange hasn't been back for 5 years? Finally, after 2 minutes of silence, Wang found a new topic. However, Ronan shook his head. I'm not interested in Strange. I just want to see what the difference is between the two Kamatages. By the way, Ronan glanced at Wang. Seeing this look, Wang couldn't help but shudder. For some reason, he always had a bad premonition. By the way, Wang couldn't help but ask back. But he regretted it after asking. Isn't this giving Ronan a chance to make a request? As a wizard, facing the request of the Supreme Sorcerer, even if it is the Supreme Sorcerer of a parallel world, he has no right to refuse. Does the other party want to read some forbidden books? No way. Ahem. Well, by the way, exchange with you about the use of dimensional mirror. In this regard, I'm still a little lacking. Ronan coughed twice and glanced at Wang guiltily. No, absolutely not. You can't. Wang refused directly. But he stopped halfway through his words, and the determination on his face slowly turned into confusion. What did he say just now? Wait, you mean dimensional mirror? Wang confirmed again. Ronan nodded very seriously, without blushing or beating his heart. The guilty feeling he had just felt had long since disappeared. He wanted to save face, but not too much. Chapter 19 Communication. Just communication. Actually, Wang heard correctly. The spell that Ronan wanted to learn, to communicate with was Dimension Mirror. He had been eyeing this spell for a long time. In his eyes, this spell was undoubtedly the coolest spell, nothing else. Of course, advanced spells like Hogs's ancient body were not included, which was cooler. Just think about it, waving your hand to create a dimensional mirror, trapping the enemy in place, but they couldn't hit you at all when facing each other. That picture was so cool. In his previous life, he dreamed of having this. During class, he transferred himself to the dimensional mirror, and the teacher couldn't see him playing games in it. Ahem. Of course, the latter was what he wanted most in this life. So he always wanted to learn this. But for some reason, Ancient One never meant to teach him this spell. When Ronan asked about this spell, Ancient One always said that the time was not right. Perhaps in Ancient One's view, once Ronan learned this, he might not study hard in class. Anyway, Ronan didn't know why. And Ronan came here for another purpose besides stealing this trick. When he returns to his world, he will accidentally perform this spell in front of Ancient One. Then, he will expose Wang for the greater good, saying that he taught him to avenge the 3 royal burgess set meals. Anyway, it was Wang who taught him, and Ronan did not lie. Well, the reason why I want to learn and communicate this spell from you is because Teacher Ancient One once said something. There are subtle differences between the parallel worlds, and many of them are similar. So the dimensional mirrors of each world are also different. That's why I want to communicate with you. Ronan remained calm. As for his face, he already blushed once just now. What else do you want from him? However, the expression on Wang's face became more and more strange. because he had never heard Ancient One say this. He had never even seen similar theories in those magic books. Really? Why didn't Master Ancient One say this to me? Wang looked at Ronan's face, trying to find clues from his face. But who is Ronan? What is a face? Of course, Wang's question still put a little pressure on Ronan. It's not that the Ancient One didn't say this to Wang, but that the Ancient One never said this. Even Ronan had never heard of it. This was all made up by Ronan himself. The reason is also very simple. Although each parallel world is similar, there is one thing that is the same for the mages of Kamataj. All their mana or magic power is borrowed from Vishanti. So, their spells are also learned from there. And Vishanti is a trinity of 3 ancient gods, which is why many names of moves are related to them. For example, the ancient body of Hogs and the Eye of Agamotto are all named after the 3 ancient gods. After all, I'm a candidate for the Supreme Sorcerer. It's normal to know more. Ronan whistled, and the little bit of guilt that disappeared reappeared. Sometimes he really admires himself. He is worthy of being the next Supreme Sorcerer. He really has no talent in deceiving people. Maybe his talent is only in charm. Oh yeah, and he also added a little bit of pretentiousness. Then why didn't Strange mention it? Wang still doubted Ronan's statement. Strange is strange. I'm me. Can I lie about the Supreme Sorcerer? Besides, Strange has only studied for a few years, but I was raised by Teacher Ancient One himself. She even checked my homework. She treats me like her own son. Strange can only be considered an insignificant little apprentice at best. Ronan immediately retorted. Comparing him with Strange was the greatest insult to him. This made him think of Ancient One's words again. He is the best among us. Bah, bah, bah. Anyway, Ronan can't be counted. He doesn't admit that Strange is better than him. At least in terms of brain, Ronan is definitely more developed than him. I don't get excited. I don't mean to doubt you. Wang waved his hands again and again. He thought something he said irritated Ronan. After all, he didn't know Ronan's temper yet. If he said something that offended him, it would not look good. After all, the Kamataj of the entire universe is one family. Well, for the time being. Okay, then let's communicate. What aspect do you want to communicate about? Wang also completely put aside his doubts. After all, the zipper's automatic opening action and the Eye of Agamotto in front of Ronan could not be fake. In addition, he had heard about what Tony Stark and others were doing. Therefore, he still trusted Ronan. Hearing this, Ronan nodded with great satisfaction. Then let's start with the first step. Ronan glanced at the frozen Wang and quickly said, well, I just want to see if your movements are standard and how good your spell casting is. Don't let me hurt you by mistake when we start sparring. Now Ronan's face is too lazy to turn red. Maybe people have to grow up after all. The same goes for face. Okay, then let's start from the beginning. Do you need me to explain it? Wang made the starting posture of the dimensional mirror. He hadn't done this for many years. After all, he didn't even need hand gestures to use the secret door. Just based on this, he was already at the top of the pyramid of mages. Of course, this is related to whether your theoretical knowledge is up to standard. Let's start from the beginning. I'll help you point out if there's anything wrong. Ronan was very satisfied with Wang's attitude, but he also suppressed the corners of his mouth that kept rising. Heh. In that world, you tricked me with a 3-layer royal burger set 3 times. So in this world, I'll trick you with a spell. Just think of it as paying off your debt. Thinking of this, Ronan felt a lot more comfortable instantly. A man as generous as him would definitely not remember such a small thing so clearly. Well, the idea is clear. Although Wang was very strange, he could only shrug his shoulders in the end and began his teaching journey. When was the last time he was taught? Thinking of this, he shook his head. Forget it, let's get started. The method of using the dimension mirror is very simple. As long as you sense the existence of space, you can use this trick to create a dimension mirror, similar to the mirror world. Wang seemed to have returned to the time when he just learned magic. Ronan, it's so profound, I feel like I can't understand it. He knows about space, and he also knows about mirrors. But how can we sense space? Looking at Ronan's clear eyes, Wang couldn't help but open his mouth. Should we also start from the step of sensing space? Wang swallowed his saliva. Well, it's better to start from that step. After all, if there are any small details in the middle that are different, it may cause our communication to fail. Ronan nodded very seriously. Hearing this, Wang pulled the corner of his mouth and couldn't help but take a deep breath. He really doubted now whether the so-called next supreme sorcerer in front of him was self-proclaimed, or did Guli make a mistake? Okay, then let's start from sensing space. As long as we enter a meditative state, empty ourselves, and then do this and that, we can sense space. Ronan, each, stare. I don't understand it at all. Okay, first take a meditative posture, then slowly feel the surroundings. Do you have any recommendation votes or something? Brothers, do you want to invest more? Chapter 20 Strange is the best wizard. 2 hours later, Ronan looked at his system panel with great satisfaction and nodded. It was still very simple. Although it was much more difficult than the arcane gate, Ronan still managed to chew this hard bone. The system finally recognized this move. Dimension mirror. Create a mirror space that is exactly the same as the surrounding reality, but relatively independent, and can lock the opponent into the mirror space. The specific strength is determined by the ability of the caster and the ability of the opponent. It is just such a simple introduction, but it is now one of the best moves in Ronan's hands. With this move, many of Ronan's tricks can come in handy. For example, turn the world upside down like the special effects killer Ancient One. How cool. However, Wang on the side was tired and also a little surprised. He was tired because the so-called communication was completely teaching Ronan how to use this move. From the beginning of feeling the space, to how to create a dimensional mirror later, and then to how to simplify the casting action. Wang was simply exhausted. Surprised because Ronan learned too fast. That's right, Wang still vaguely remembered that when he learned this move, it took him a long time to learn it. Even Strange was not very proficient in using this move. But in just 2 hours, Ronan not only learned this move, but also became more proficient than Strange. This made Wang look at him with new eyes. Why is Ronan not the supreme sorcerer in their world? At least it is easier to teach. But this idea was only a flash of light. Although Strange is a bit arrogant like Tony Stark, at least they have cooperated for so long. If someone else came, he might not be able to get used to it. What a pleasant exchange. It seems that Wang, you have a very solid foundation. It's a pity that you are not the supreme sorcerer. Ronan closed the system panel with satisfaction, and the smile in his eyes could not be hidden. However, Wang pulled the corner of his mouth. What do you mean it's a pity that he is not the supreme sorcerer? Can I understand that you are fanning the flames? Hey, if Teacher Ancient One is still here, I will definitely talk to her. What's so good about Strange? I feel that you are the best candidate for the supreme sorcerer. When I go back, the other you will definitely be my best helper. Perhaps he felt that praising once was not sincere enough, so Ronan praised again. At the same time, he was determined again in his heart. After he successfully took over and became the supreme sorcerer, Wang would definitely be his most capable assistant. I hope this day will not be too far away. Even Charles III successfully ascended the throne, let alone him. Is there a prince in the world who has been a prince for 60 years? Hearing this, Wang couldn't help but frown. He never thought that he would be given a spell for nothing, and he would have to work like a cow and a horse for Ronan. Although they are all contributions to Kamatage, they always feel something is wrong. Oh, it seems that you have an opinion on the position of the Supreme Sorcerer. However, this time Ronan did not wait for Wang's answer, and a familiar voice sounded. The space around him was like glass, with mirrors with clear edges and corners appearing in front of him. This voice Ronan turned his head a little stiffly, his face full of colors and a very complicated expression. There was no one behind him. But he was very familiar with the other party's voice. That's right. The person who said this was none other than the Ancient One. Old teacher? Ronan swallowed his saliva, glanced at the air behind him, and couldn't help but confirm. He couldn't even be sure which Ancient One he was in front of him. Ronan had said before that the Ancient One in the Marvel world was not dead at all. She just left her body. From the last scene Strange saw her, we can know that the Ancient One can survive in the state of soul body. Of course, no one can be sure whether it was the last scene of the Ancient One's death, or she left the earth and went to various unknown worlds. Bang. The next second Ronan's soul left his body and the astral projection was passively activated. The surrounding world seemed to be stagnant at this second. The panic expression on Wang's face stopped on his face, as if it was frozen forever. At this time, Ronan finally saw the true face of Ancient One. When he really saw the soul of Ancient One, Ronan swallowed his saliva again. So strong because Ronan could clearly feel the powerlessness from this Ancient One. Hello, the Supreme Sorcerer from a parallel world. Ancient One smiled and gently landed in front of Ronan. She didn't look like a powerful wizard at all, but more like a kind and amiable neighbor. The powerful force that was so daunting just now seemed to have subsided. Don't joke, old master Ancient One, I'm just a small wizard. The very small kind. Ronan pinched his index finger and thumb together, decisively discarding the good impression of the Korean country. He wanted to call him teacher, but after thinking about it, he decided to call him Master Ancient One. Although they all look the same, this one is not his teacher after all. No, although you are completely different from Strange, there is one thing that is exactly the same. You are destined to be the only candidate for the Supreme Sorcerer. The Ancient One looked at Ronan with a smile, and there seemed to be a different meaning in her eyes. And her words made Ronan even more scared. Because in his experience, once someone starts to praise you, it means that the other party either asks you to do something, or there is a conspiracy behind it. Just like before he came, the Ancient One even said you are the most special one. Ronan shuddered at the thought. No, 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 how can I compare with Strange? He is so powerful. He can see so many endings and find the only way. More importantly, he is so talented that he single-handedly took on the task of protecting the earth. He even signed a contract with Dormammu so that Dormammu would never dare to invade the earth. What a great achievement. Ronan began to talk nonsense, because the more he looked at the smile on the corner of the Ancient One's mouth, the more uneasy he felt, because he was so familiar with this smile. Every time when Ancient One asked him to rewrite his homework, he had this expression. Ronan remembered it clearly. If it were you, maybe there wouldn't be a need for so many tragic endings, and everyone could have a happy life. You'll do better than Strange. Ancient One still had that smiling expression. Oh my god, the more I look at it, the creepier it gets. Ronan shook his head frantically. Boss, please stop sticking flags in my way, I can't accept it. What if I really meet Thanos in the future, and you kill me? However, before Ronan could reply, Ancient One seemed to have seen something again. And there seems to be a familiar aura hidden in you. This method is like myself. Chapter 21. Ancient One is back from the dead. Fuck. Ronan couldn't help but curse in his heart. You can see this too? Should I say you are worthy of it? Is this what you are talking about? Ronan showed the palm of his left hand. The golden hexagram pattern began to glow faintly. When she saw this pattern, Guyi's eyes showed a hint of understanding. I'm afraid she already knew what it was. It seems that you know about this, but it seems that you don't know the details. I didn't tell you, did I? Guyi slowly walked in front of Ronan and gently stroked Ronan's right face with his right hand. That action was very similar to the memory of Guyi touching his face when he was a child. Wait. Suddenly, Ronan couldn't help but widen his eyes. He thought of something. Since he can travel through parallel worlds, can Guyi, the former Supreme Sorcerer, do it? No, there is another possibility. It is said that after the death of the mages of Kamataj, their souls will return to Vishanti. This is the price they pay for borrowing magic power. Guyi, the Supreme Sorcerer, can't escape it either, right? After all, that was Vishanti. But why did the Ancient One in front of him resurrect again? Could it be that the Ancient One was Vishanti's Perkes person in the world? Thinking of this possibility, Ronan immediately gave a negative answer. This idea was just his guess. In his previous life, he could only be regarded as a movie fan, and he only had a vague understanding of the settings of comics. Not to mention, those so-called comics sometimes have their own settings. So, he could only rely on guessing. Child, I know you have a lot of questions. But at this stage, knowing too much is not good for you at all. Since I didn't tell you that, there must be a reason. The Ancient One patted Ronan's head gently, and his eyes exuded the kindness of a woman. This kind of look has never been seen in the Ancient One's eyes since Ronan was 10 years old. He only saw relief in those eyes that he couldn't understand. Teacher Ancient One, I'm actually just a high school student who still has homework to do. I think Strange would be happy to participate in a mission like saving the world. So, you won't embarrass a little high school student like me, right? Ronan tentatively changed his address. Of course, his little cleverness did not escape the eyes of Ancient One. Smart little guy, you are indeed the most unique one in countless universes. Ancient One saw through Ronan's little thoughts, but did not point it out. However, this sentence almost broke Ronan's defense. Damn. Are you guys done yet? It's fine that Conqueror Kang ruined my heart, but why are the two Ancient Ones playing like this? I'm just a child, only 16 years old. Ronan burst into tears. Ha 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 ha, you are indeed much more interesting than Strange. Looking at Ronan like this, Ancient One couldn't help laughing. In fact, she is not a person who shows her emotions. Ronan has been with her for so long, and rarely sees her emotions so outward. I didn't expect to see it today. Okay, I know it's useless, no matter what I say. Teacher, what do you want me to do? You insisted on letting me come to this universe, and found me at this time. Ronan sighed. He knew that some things could not be avoided after all. Life is like this. Since you can't escape, you might as well enjoy this moment seriously. It seems that you misunderstood what I meant. Ancient One smiled. She took Ronan's wrist, exerted force with her feet, and the two souls penetrated the Supreme Sanctuary and came to the towering roof. From here, you can overlook the entire Kamatage. When Ronan was a child, he liked to sit here and look at Kamatage over and over again. I always wondered if I had a dream, and when I woke up, everything was back to normal. As the guardian of the earth, Kamatage has encountered many invasions from external forces over the years. But many times, I never interfered, because I know that many things are destined. Ancient One looked at the sunset not far away, and gently twisted his right hand in the air. In an instant, the world was turned upside down, and the sun and the moon went backwards. The setting sun slowly rose from the west, and the moon and stars that occupied half of the sky slowly disappeared. The entire Kamatage began to change rapidly. The towering buildings were dismantled bit by bit, and the smooth and clean ground began to become bumpy. Even the surrounding mountains were changing a little bit in this environment. They were either slowly rising or slowly falling. Time is flowing backwards. But in Ronan's eyes, he saw a completely different picture. He saw Thanos enter the earth with the Infinity Gauntlet, and saw the moment when the finger snap sounded. He saw countless people annihilated in the air, and turned into ashes. Soon, he saw Odin come to the earth as an old man, followed by his two sons. Then, it was a scene that Ronan was very familiar with, the invasion of the Chitauri. But the picture still did not stop, and a picture that surprised Ronan appeared. Dormammu's dark energy invaded the entire sky. Even Dormammu's face had appeared above their heads. A burning pain came from the palm of Ronan's left hand. At some point, the hexagram in the palm of his left hand had already emitted a dazzling golden light. Ronan was at a loss for a moment. He hadn't reacted yet. What on earth had happened? How did Dormammu's face appear on Earth? However, before he could hear Ancient One's explanation, an extremely familiar figure flew out from behind him. Ancient One, yes, a younger version of Ancient One. Hundreds of Kamatage's disciples rushed out of the temple, holding red or yellow ragged rings in their hands. These magic rings merged into a huge shield and flew into the sky above Kamatage. At this time, Ronan suddenly realized these scenes were all the past that Ancient One had experienced. At this time, Ancient One's voice also slowly sounded. I have always abided by the rules of the Supreme Sorcerer. Unless the earth is devastated, Kamatage will remain hidden from the world. I have done well. Few people know of our existence. Ancient One took 2 steps forward and looked at herself fighting with Dormammu in the sky, calm and unperturbed. Her tone seemed like a person's comment on his life before death. But most people can only go to another world with these comments. You really did a good job, teacher. Ronan looked at the battle scene in the sky with a complicated expression. For a moment, he didn't know how to comment. Just seeing the illusion at that time, Ronan already had an uncontrollable trembling feeling. He couldn't imagine whether he could be as good as Ancient One when facing Dormammu. No, child. What I can do, you can do too. Ancient One walked gently to Ronan and placed her right hand on his shoulder. Her voice was very soft, like a spring breeze. Although some of the changes were beyond my expectations. But since I saw you for the first time, I put my worries aside. You will do everything I can, and even better than me. And we only have one request for you. Follow your heart. Rules can never bind you. Thank you Liu Yuting for the 200-point reward. This is the first time I have received a reward. I'm touched. Chapter 22 Tony, the war is coming. Late at night. Avengers base. Ronan sat on the roof of the base, feeling the night wind. Above his head, the stars surrounded him, and the bright moon hung high. Such a quiet and peaceful atmosphere could not calm Ronan's restless heart. No, to be more precise, it was his uneasy heart. After meeting the Ancient One of this world, Ronan returned to the Avengers base, and has been on the roof until now. The excitement of learning the dimension mirror has long disappeared. Teacher, you really know how to add burdens to me. Ronan looked at the sky with a wry smile on his face. He had been thinking about what the Ancient One said. What does it mean to follow your heart? What does it mean that rules can't restrain me? He never thought that a role that came to play soy sauce, would unexpectedly encounter so many situations. Whether it was the stranger on Vormir, or the Ancient One who had already died in this world, they all brought some unexpected surprises to Ronan. Of course, no one knows whether it was a surprise or a shock. In Ronan's impression, Ancient One, as the Supreme Sorcerer, has always abided by the various rules of the Supreme Sorcerer, just as she said. She does not participate in the wars of humans on Earth, and does not affect the trend of any time flow. Even when aliens invaded, as long as the Earth was not in danger of destruction, she never showed up. Ancient One, who strictly abides by the rules, is completely different from Strange, who does whatever he wants. Compared with Ancient One, Strange in Ronan's impression is simply rotten to the point of being rotten. If it is said that there is a desperate and bold side in Strange's character, this was shown when he just became the Supreme Sorcerer. However, when Peter Parker of this universe found him and wanted him to cast the amnesia spell, Strange actually agreed. 5 years have passed since he became the Supreme Sorcerer and Peter Parker asked him for help. This is 5 years. It's enough for a novice to become a mature and stable wizard. Not to mention, he is still the Supreme Sorcerer. Even so, he still helped Peter Parker cast the spell Amnesia Spell. Amnesia Spell is a spell with a very high risk factor, which seriously interferes with the historical process and human mind. Even if Ronan has never come into contact with it, he knows that it is very likely a forbidden black magic. Could it be that Strange really lost his mind? Or did he also follow his heart? Ronan didn't know. But he was sure that things were definitely not as simple as he saw. Especially after connecting this series of events, Ronan was even more certain that something he didn't know about must have happened in the middle. The only person who might know about it was the Ancient One. But as we all know, the Ancient One is also a riddle man. Normally, he would have to guess the mind of a riddle man, but now there are so many riddle men. Either the hooded man who disguised his identity, or Kang the Conqueror who looks harmless but ridiculously strong. Even the pattern on Ronan's left hand is a mystery. Is this kidding me? Thinking of this, Ronan looked up at the sky and fiercely gave the sky a middle finger. It's a good superhero movie, but you turned it into a suspense movie. I even prepared popcorn, and you ask me to guess riddles? Fuck you. Ronan spat at the sky fiercely, not knowing who he was targeting. But based on the principle of escaping, is shameful but extremely useful, Ronan didn't want to think about it anymore. Isn't it nice to watch the live broadcast with popcorn? Why bother guessing this and that? Anyway, no matter what, there will be a solution. Don't bother with these riddlers anymore. Ronan is the one. At this moment, Ronan's mood was also much better. As I said, if the matter is related to him, then he will settle all the matters step by step. If it has nothing to do with him, it depends on his mood. As for what others are thinking, Ronan doesn't care. He doesn't want to guess. I didn't expect you to be here. Do you wizards have any special hobbies? Just as Ronan was further consolidating his Tau heart, Tony Stark flew up from below. Only Tony Stark can fly around in a suit at night. I have a lot of special hobbies, but flying around in armor at night is not one of them. Ronan rolled his eyes and couldn't help complaining. Tony Stark always takes attracting other people's attention as his primary goal. It has been like this since the beginning. Even until the last scene, he still has to learn from Thanos and say, "I'm Iron Man." You are already a father, isn't it better to be more mature and stable? Thinking of the last scene, Ronan rolled his eyes to the sky. Although it was shocking, he wanted to complain more. Huh? Did you know I have a daughter? Tony Stark landed beside Ronan, and the iron suit slowly faded, revealing his body. Judging from his outfit, it seems that he just came out of the laboratory. Not only do I know you have a daughter, but I also know that her name is Morgan, and she is a very cute little girl. Looking at Tony Stark's slightly proud eyes, Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth. Arrogant old man. Didn't you think of your daughter when you snapped your fingers? I almost forgot that you, like Strange, can see the past and the future. But you are so boring. The unknown is more interesting, isn't it? According to Tony Stark's personality, he is obviously not interested in such things. In a way, such people live more freely. So, you still come to me so late. It's not to discuss such philosophical questions with me, right? Ronan looked into Tony Stark's eyes and smiled. Because on his face, Ronan saw a trace of uneasiness. I'm afraid he is not as free and easy as he said about the unknown future. I know that you wizards and sorcerers are good at divination. Although I know that those things are basically fake. But other people are not like this. There is always an indescribable atmosphere in the team. You know, they are not as strong as I'm inside. Tony Stark shrugged and said something completely irrelevant. However, Ronan understood what he meant. So, you came to me to predict the future? Ronan put away the smile on his face. No, not the future. I just want to ask you to calculate whether what we are doing can succeed. After all, no one wants to face the slightly pessimistic atmosphere in the team. Tony Stark shook his head repeatedly, trying to act as if it had nothing to do with him. However, his missed heartbeat betrayed him. Ronan slowly turned his head and looked at the unreachable night sky. The breeze blew across his face, and his constantly swaying hair blocked Ronan's sight from time to time. At this moment, Tony Stark felt a feeling from Ronan that he had never felt before. He seemed to be completely different from the jumpy look before. Tony, the war is coming. Can everyone give some free recommendation votes? And everyone must not keep it. Follow-up reading is very important. Really important. Chapter 23. I'm just a little narrator. Perhaps Ronan's words were too obscure, or perhaps Tony Stark chose to remain silent. In short, in the next few days, Ronan did not see any worried expressions on other people's faces. Instead, he became more and more excited every day. Because the production of the Infinity Gauntlet has entered the final stage. As long as they can successfully embed the 6 Infinity Stones in it, their task can be said to be completed in stages. Ronan stood in the laboratory, watching Tony Stark carefully put one rough stone after another into it, and the others around him held their breath. Slow down, slower. That's right, that's it. Embed it slowly. Tony Stark stared at the mechanical claw embedding the last Infinity Stone into the groove, and couldn't help but smile. Bang. At this moment, the sound of imitating an explosion sounded from beside him. Several people were startled. The person who made the sound was Ronan. Everyone looked at Ronan speechlessly, as if silently condemning his prank. Hey, buddy, you stole the role I had planned a long time ago. The little raccoon on the side looked a little dissatisfied. This was originally his plan, but as soon as he finished speaking, he was glared at by others. And he could only raise his hands in surrender and express his mistake. So, a new problem arises. Who can wear this glove and snap that finger? And what impact will this decision have on the Avengers? At this time, Ronan put on airs and made his voice more powerful, just like the narration in the movie. Several people were no longer surprised by Ronan's bad taste. Only Tony Stark looked at Ronan deeply, not knowing what he was saying. However, Ronan's attention was focused on this glove. You know, Thanos' Infinity Glove was made by the Dwarf King. in order to prevent the Dwarf King from making similar artifacts again. Not only did he freeze his hands, but he even destroyed the planet Nadav. The purpose was to be foolproof. But just like that, the Infinity Glove that others longed for was restored in the hands of these people in front of them. Of course, it is still unknown whether this glove can use the power of the 6 gems. But you can snap your fingers to make a wish. This is shocking enough. Using science to answer metaphysics, this world is so magical. Well, just as Ronan said, we are facing a problem now. Who is going to do the finger snap that will kill people? Steve Rogers took a deep breath and asked the final question. Who is going to snap his fingers? Tony Stark groped his chin, took 2 steps, and turned to look at Ronan, who was hiding aside. His action also made others look at Ronan. Ronan, who was hiding aside to watch the show, had a dark face. Why are you looking at me? Ronan glared at Tony Stark. He was just a poor little narrator. Why did he look at him for such a thing? Don't you want to give some advice? After all, one of the 6 gems belongs to you. Tony Stark pointed to the time gem on the glove. Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth. Okay, you could learn it to threaten me with this. If I had known, I would not have given the tip a few nights ago. I still say that my purpose of coming here is just to safely retrieve the time stone. I don't want to interfere with your choice, Ronan said righteously. However, he didn't think so in his heart. He was sure that Tony Stark's look just now was definitely not to ask him for any advice. Instead, he was asking him if he could wear this glove. There was no need to ask the answer. Ronan would definitely choose no. Thanos, a product of the Eternals, almost died after snapping his fingers twice. What's more, he is a mortal body. If he can't be cured, he will die. Goodbye. I'll do it. At this time, the Fat House Thor came out from the back. He walked towards the glove with an anxious face, but was stopped by several other people. In addition to his urgent desire to bring others back, he actually had a sense of guilt hidden in his heart. If his axe had hit Thanos' head instead of his chest at that time, then all this would probably not have happened. Thor, calm down. We haven't decided who will do the snap yet. Tony Stark and Steve Rogers stopped him together. They thought that in Thor's current state, he might not be able to withstand the backlash of snapping his fingers. No, only I can do this. Do you know what blood flows in my body? Thor's pride as the god of thunder did not allow him to be willing to fall behind. However, several people did not listen to him, and even an unknown narrator said the word cheese sauce, which made Thor almost go up to park with him alone. But no matter what, no one agreed with his idea. Lightning can't help you, buddy. I have to do this. At this time, Bruce Banner, who had been thinking with his chin in his hand, spoke. His opening attracted everyone's attention. You all know the end of Thanos. These rough stones almost killed him. You can't bear it at all. Bruce Banner walked to the front of the glove. Then why can you resist it? Steve Rogers asked softly. But this time, none of them stopped Bruce Banner's action. I'm not sure. But we have tested that these stones mainly release gamma rays. It's like I was born for this. Bruce Banner shook his head and stared at the Infinity Gauntlet in front of him. A very appropriate BGM sounded at this moment. The sound of the music seemed to add a bit of tragic grandeur to his words. Thor, with cheese sauce flowing in his body, did not become the one who wore the Infinity Gauntlet as he wished. And it was at this time that Hulk. No, it should be Bruce Banner who stood up. Can he take this responsibility? The evil narration sounded again, causing everyone to roll their eyes. Little Raccoon, can you stop that damn music? The voices of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers sounded at the same time. Little Raccoon shrugged and stepped on the music off button. Turned to Ronan and blinked. I don't know when. He actually jumped onto Ronan's shoulder. And, Ronan, if you don't give me some advice, I have the right to ask you to delete the content you filmed. After all, this concerns my portrait rights. Tony Stark pointed at the camera in Ronan's hand with a very arrogant attitude. What? Ronan's eyes widened. What? You, the Iron Man, have also learned to act like a big shot. You have also learned to do something like a certain actress knocking down other people's phones? Looking at Tony Stark's unusually firm look, Ronan curled his lips and turned off his camera. My opinion is that you'd better not die. Chapter 24 Thanos, I will disarm you. Several people didn't care much about Ronan's blessing. What they were most grateful for was that they drove Ronan, the narrator, out of the laboratory. Ronan didn't care much about being driven out of the laboratory. He turned and walked into the hall and came to the time traveling machine. The inner ghost Nebula was standing not far away, her expression full of excitement. "You are late. Father has already arrived with a large army." Hearing Ronan's footsteps, Nebula blocked the front of the machine. The machine behind her has started, and the defense system of the Avengers base has also been officially activated. This means that Bruce Banner is going to snap his fingers, and the Thanos from another world will also come to this world. I know. Ronan nodded indifferently, and even sat on the sofa next to him. Nebula looked at Ronan with disbelief on her face. She didn't know how Ronan could say such a thing. Thanos, the overlord of the universe. Everyone in the entire universe knows him. Even if the wizard in front of him didn't know Thanos' identity, didn't anyone else mention it to him? Why was he not nervous at all when he heard that Thanos was coming, but looked very relaxed? This is not right. Don't show that you haven't seen the world. Didn't your father Thanos tell you that the supreme sorcerer on Earth can't know the future? Ronan crossed his legs and couldn't help saying, in terms of family education, Thanos is the same as his name. Both daughters wanted to kill their adoptive father. One had already had the intention to rebel, and the other was impatient to bring him to this time point and come to die early. People say that there are only wrong names, not wrong nicknames. This is really true. You know all this? Then why didn't you stop it? Or you are different from that wizard. Do you want to join my father? Nebula seemed to have found a suitable reason. Ronan couldn't help rolling his eyes. In a few hours, Thanos would disappear into ashes. If I go to him now, what's the difference from joining the fruit party in 1949? It seems that the impression Strange left on you makes you think that the Supreme Sorcerer is easy to deal with. Should I say thank you for letting you underestimate the enemy, or is it that he is too weak? Ronan shook his neck, as if doing warm-up exercises. Next is the time for Thanos' army to invade. Although he would never confront Thanos head-on according to his idea. But those soldiers are all naked experience. Let those people take care of the real boss. Anyway, it's time for them to show off. Ronan can help the remaining soldiers. It's not bad to get experience. Although I don't know what you are talking about, but you won't be arrogant for long. Father's army is here. Let you feel it. What is the unforgettable fear? Nebula laughed. She had sensed that Thanos' warship was here. As soon as the voice fell, a warship rushed out of the vortex of the time machine and instantly overturned the ceiling of the base. At the same time, in the laboratory not far away, an extremely huge energy had erupted, sweeping the whole world in an instant. Here it comes. Ronan muttered silently and closed his eyes. The secret door appeared silently from behind him and enveloped him inside. Then, there was an endless roar. One energy bomb after another bombarded the Avengers base, and balls of fire began to burn. The earth shattered, and the ocean roared. Smoke and dust almost covered the entire sky. The Avengers base built on the water collapsed, and a large amount of seawater poured back into the Avengers base. Everyone in the Avengers base was already covered by a sea of fire. Then there was a vast ocean formed by the backflow of seawater. Ronan stood on a ruin not far away, looking at the scene in front of him with helplessness. Fortunately, he was prepared. At that moment, he teleported to Kamataj, took an apple from the king's table, and then teleported back. Although it was not yet time for him to wreak havoc in the low segment, it was not bad to watch the scene of the three supers fighting the purple potato. He didn't know if watching more videos of the king would improve his combat effectiveness. But at least it would please his body and mind. Snap. Ronan took a bite of the apple and looked at Thanos, who was teleported down from the battleship. This height, this body shape, this appearance, plus his outrageous dream. A perfect villain. However, while Ronan was observing Thanos, Thanos also discovered Ronan. At the same time, Steve Rogers, Tony Stark and Thor also walked out of the ruins. The three superheroes and purple sweet potato gathered at the same time. The show was about to begin. Are you the wizard that Nebula mentioned? However, what Ronan never expected was that the first person Thanos talked to was him. You should not know me, right? Ronan stopped chewing the apple. He never thought that he, a bystander, would become the main tank who pulled the ridicule. More importantly, Thanos should not know him. I don't know you. But I heard from Nebula that you let her bring me here. You are such a strange wizard. Thanos' voice was not loud, but it was loud enough for the other people to hear. Damn. This is a counter-espionage plan. Ronan never thought that you, a cosmic villain, would not watch the battle video, but read The Art of War. Are you so good at the 36 stratagems? Slander. You are slandering me. I'm just a little high school student. Why do you slander me like this? Ronan protested against this slander. As he said before, if he said that Nebula was a traitor, would others believe it? She has a life and death friendship with Tony Stark. And Ronan is just an outsider after all. He can come to help these people fight monsters, which is enough to give them face. Why do you have to do such a thankless thing? Humph. Thanos didn't say anything, just snorted coldly, but threw the knife in his hand at Ronan. The two-part sword spun and flew towards Ronan at a very fast speed. Hey, I'm just a narrator. Why do you have such a big grudge? Ronan curled his lips and stretched out his right hand very casually. With his 5 fingers pointed at the rapidly flying sword, Ronan also showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. A classic villain sneer. Almost in the blink of an eye, the whistling sword had already flown in front of Ronan. Thanos, feel the pain. Disarm you. Swish. The 3 superheroes widened their eyes almost at the same time. They looked at the scene in front of them with some disbelief. Because Thanos' two-part sword disappeared at the moment when it was about to chop down on his head. Chapter 25 Thanos, your opponents are them. Compared to the shock of Tony Stark and others, Ronan seemed unusually calm. He gently put down his right hand and tilted his head towards Thanos. Thanos, I have confiscated your weapon. Do you feel the pain? Although Ronan, who said this, was unusually tall, he looked like a world-saving hermit. However, he was actually panicking. Oh my god, it was just a little bit short. Fortunately, he activated the mirror dimension in advance, otherwise he might not be able to dodge this knife. Thinking of this, Ronan looked at his system panel again. Among them, there was a +1 light spot behind the mirror dimension. Mirror dimension, +1, create a mirror space that is exactly the same as the surrounding reality, but completely independent, and can lock people or objects into the mirror space. The strength of the mirror space depends on the caster's spellcasting level and the strength of the spell. +1 features. The casting speed is accelerated, the mirror strength is slightly enhanced, and the enemies in the mirror space will have a chance to be invaded by illusions and think it is the real world. It was this move that allowed Ronan to lock Thanos' weapon into the mirror dimension. This is why he had to learn this move. At least when facing Thanos, he still had a certain ability to protect himself. Originally, according to his idea, he wanted to bring the space gem he got from Loki. After all, the power of the space gem is quite strong. Although it can't play a big role against the enemy, it is first class for escaping. However, Ancient One told Ronan one thing. That is, there can only be 6 infinite gems with different properties at each time point. When it is found that they appear repeatedly, one of them will lose its effect at the least, and it will cause drastic changes in the universe at the worst. Of course, it is very likely that the second original stone that appears will crack on the spot. Imagine the scene of the explosion of the infinite original stone, and Ronan was scared when he thought about it. Even if he was a novice, he knew that his space gem was definitely not as good as the one in the hands of the Avengers. After all, they are the hosts, and he is just a tourist. So, the space gem was left at home. It seems that Nebula was right to ask me to pay more attention to you. You who never appeared in my memory are from another world like me. Are you also the wizard who guards the time stone? Thanos had obviously seen Nebula's memory. Unfortunately, Ronan did not have any intention of answering him, and turned to look at the 3 superheroes who had been watching the show. Hey, I have confiscated his weapons for you. Aren't you going to do it? The Thunder God of Asgard, the protector of America, the creator of Ironheart. You are not even as good as a high school student, are you? Ronan even used the method of provoking. Although this method of provoking was bad enough that several people could hear it at the first time. However, Ronan succeeded. Thor opened his hands, and dazzling lightning struck from the sky, and Stormbreaker and Thor's hammer appeared in his hands at the same time. That casual outfit also turned into combat clothes. The speed of changing clothes is really fast. Woohoo. Thor, you are so handsome. I can give you a 9 for this outfit. Ronan put his hands on his mouth, forming a trumpet shape, just like a cheerleader on the sidelines. I don't know if it was because of Ronan's words. Tony Stark was not to be outdone, tapping his chest with his right hand, and his iron suit covered his face. Yo. Tony, you are also very handsome. Come on, kill this purple potato. However, Thor and Tony Stark didn't care about what Ronan said, but just looked at Steve Rogers in unison. The meaning is very simple. We have all transformed. What about you? Steve Rogers glanced at the two of them, then glared at Ronan in the distance. Throw away the shield in his left hand directly. Thanos punched the shield and flew away, then watched the shield fly back into Steve Rogers' hands. Captain America's action seemed to be a signal. The three people walked down the ruins and slowly walked towards the sitting Thanos. Woohoo. The most anticipated plot of the three supers fighting the purple potato is about to begin. These people did not waste Ronan's pre-war mobilization, and seemed to be in high spirits. Whether it was the walking posture or the swinging of their hands, each one was more stylish than the other, just highlighting a full of force. Ronan waved his hand, dragged out a stool from the open secret door, and sat in this best viewing position. Maybe one will find out later that he not only lost an apple, but also a chair. You are unwilling to accept failure. But what is the result? Thanos lowered his head and began his villain speech in his low voice. How to say it? If Thanos becomes a voice actor, he will definitely be first class. You still have to face me. Thanos raised his head and looked at the three people who walked in front of him, with a touch of disdain on his face. He has seen that memory once. So, he knows everything that happened. I thought that, if half of the life was destroyed, the other half would thrive. But you have to prove it to me. That's impossible. Thanos seemed to be talking to himself at this moment, but in fact, he was really speaking out his inner thoughts. Many years ago, his ideal was to use the Infinity Stones to destroy half of the people in the entire universe. He had done it in this world, but it was considered a failure. Now, he has to continue to complete this task. Yes, we are so stubborn. Tony Stark answered casually. Otherwise, Thanos, who has been talking to himself all the time, would be too embarrassed. So, I have a brand new idea. I want to turn this universe into atomic dust, and then use the raw stones you helped me find to create a new universe. Thanos bent down to pick up his helmet from the ground, patted the dust on it, and put it on his head. He also stood up from the stone. Lightning had burst out from Thor's hands, and his eyes had turned into electric light. It's a pity you can't see it, Thanos said, and opened his right hand. Ronan suddenly felt a move in his heart, and a layer of mirror visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared in front of him. The next second, the mirror was hit hard, and a large number of cracks appeared in front of Ronan. Damn it. Ronan's eyes widened, but his hands were not slow. He threw the apple core he had eaten directly on the ground, and immediately released his magic power with both hands. The surging magic power quickly repaired the broken mirror, but Thanos' weapon still persevered in hitting Ronan's dimensional mirror again and again. He almost forgot that Thanos' knife was also one of the artifacts made by the Dwarf King. If it was so easy to be controlled by the mirror space, it would not be called an artifact. Why don't you hurry up? Do you want to see me being killed by the knife? At this moment, Ronan was no longer as calm as before. Who would have thought that this old guy Thanos had such a hand? And Ronan's words became the fuse of the whole battle. The war is about to break out. It has become a habit to update one chapter before going to work every day, and one chapter after getting home. It's a pity that I'm not allowed to slack off at work recently, otherwise I could save a few more manuscripts. What a pity. Finally, I'm begging for recommendation votes and monthly votes. Everyone, please give me some fan points, even a little or two will do. At least don't let the fan list be blank. It's very difficult. The first on the fan list is still my own small account. It's too difficult for me. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.